This is the Big 12 Conference. This is a different league. Here we go. It's a stand on business, wheels off Wednesday. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. Anthony behind the scenes on the video side. We've got T-Chains, Taman Turner on the audio side. It is a wheels off transfer portal tracker Wednesday. Over 2,000 guys in the portal. Christian Anderson declares for the NBA draft. We've got our final Big 12 basketball power rankings coming up here in about 15 minutes. And then Ross Dellinger, senior writer for Yahoo Sports, will join us at 7:40 Central Time. But, sir, good morning.
Let me ask you something, James.
I have something to ask you as well.
So there's an NFL reporter who's a female who is photographed at a romantic getaway with a current sitting NFL head coach. And nothing, I guess, crazy in the photographs other than that they're together and at one point holding hands in a hot tub and then by a pool for hours. Are we weird to think that that's a little weird?
Are we weird to think it's weird?
Are we off to look further into that and think, seems like not just a casual friendship, but more of a romantic relationship?
Oh, yeah, definitely that.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know if I was taking crazy pills here because by statements released from all actors involved, we're all crazy for looking way too deep into this.
Why do they care if people know or think if they're in a relationship or not?
Well, because they're both married and...
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I guess...
buried the lead there.
Sorry, I guess I left this out.
I saw the headlines, but
assuming you knew what I was referring to.
I do know what you're referring to,
Okay.
and I've seen all the headlines and all the buzz about it, but yeah, you buried the lead with they're both married.
Also, though, I mean, even if they weren't, it is a bit bizarre to have somebody that covers a league in a romantic relationship with somebody that's in the league.
With the coach?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not covering the team.
Right.
She's covering the league, and even if she's covering the team, that's probably wrong.
Is
if there's smoke, there's fire. That's what I've always heard.
There's fire.
And if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it must be a duck.
Start calling you Jeff Garcia.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, that part I did not know. This is this the new sports version of the Coldplay meme? Coldplay concert 2.0?
Yeah, but the problem was they acted guilty in that instance. This is the complete opposite of it. It's being caught red-handed and being like, this is not what it looks like. Oh, it's not. Huh.
Right. Yeah, the statements were very different from all parties involved. My question to you is going to be, before we dive into this transfer portal,
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy.
No, I never think you're crazy. Ever.
I mean, occasionally, I'm sure you do.
No, totally think everything's good.
Got it.
Well-oiled machine. Do you chew gum?
Yes.
Chewing gum guy?
I don't understand the question.
That's just, are you a big gum guy? Do you chew a lot of gum?
No, I'm not a big gum guy. I am a gum guy. The problem is I can't just have one piece. So I've got to remove it from the equation.
Okay. Yeah, I got a text from my parents last night. They were watching our show yesterday, which you can catch anytime because we are on YouTube live each and every day, 8 to 11 Eastern time. But also, all of our shows are podcasted across all the various podcast platforms, and then on YouTube you can go back and watch any show from any day. So they're watching the show yesterday, and my mom, we're breaking down the transfer portal. We're talking Utah basketball. We'll hit on Kansas State today. We're talking Flory Badunga. All she can see is that I'm chewing gum.
Yeah.
During the show.
Yeah.
She was very concerned about my jaw mechanics, so today I'm not chewing gum.
Are you?
Because Mom knows best.
Are you usually chewing gum during the show?
I usually chew gum for the first 2 segments.
Interesting.
Have you ever noticed?
No, I guess not.
See, we work together every day, but she zeroed in on it, and then my dad said, well, I've never noticed, but now that it's been pointed out, I can't not see it.
Wow, so always the first 2 segments?
Yeah.
Is there any particular reason for that? Are you feeling a bit self-conscious about your breath?
No, everything's
I mean, you
good.
should, but that's neither here nor there.
I'm brushing my teeth before the show.
Good.
Which is a pretty big deal. Takes a lot of effort. But there are a few reasons. Chewing gum has a lot of notable benefits, okay? Number one, it improves brain function. There is research behind the fact that it can improve alertness, focus, and, most importantly for us, short-term memory.
Okay.
There's point number one. Point number two.
I'd like to see the research in that.
I'll send you some notes. Number two, stress and anxiety relief. The repetitive chewing gum motion can reduce cortisol levels and ease feelings of tension and or anxiety. Kind of loosens us up naturally.
Got it. Okay.
Number three, all the other stuff like digestion, appetite control, ear pressure, which I struggle with. It's allergy season. Allergy season is the worst, right, T-Chains? Like, we finally get some nice days and we can't go outside and enjoy the weather because there's pollen everywhere. It's the worst.
Sounds like a you problem.
Me and the millions of others who struggle with allergies in Taman, who's never outspoken about it in any way.
It sucks.
All right, transfer portal season. There's over 2,000.
Wait, no. We're working on the benefits of gum chewing. Basically, what it sounds like is it cures cancer. It's
pretty much
really the greatest modern invention in human history. I thought I was chewing plastic. I thought most of gum was made from plastics, but happy to find out that it's not. That's good to know.
Yeah, essentially, gum makes you smarter. So that's.
You ever seen the movie The Birdcage?
It's not bury the lead. The Bird Cage. Is that different from the Bird Box?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I've seen the Bird Box. That's the one with Sandra
Birdcage is
Bullock.
with like Nathan Lane and Robin Williams. It's a really funny movie. At any rate, part of it, like he's chewing gum while he's dancing, and Robin Williams gets annoyed about it, and he's like, "It helps me think. It makes me smarter." And he's like, "Maybe you should use more gum."
Well, he's
so I
not
guess
wrong.
it's not completely unfounded.
He's not wrong.
Yeah.
All right, you sent a text yesterday that I think is a fantastic just kind of note here because it does have Big 12 ties, and that is after Michigan won their national championship, all of a sudden all these general managers and anonymous coaches are accusing Michigan of tampering in the portal. That's why they got the best guys. And Mike Boynton, former Oklahoma State head coach, who's in his second season as the top assistant to Dusty May, took that personally and fired back and said, "We never went after Braden Smith." For me, outside of the tampering stuff, I just love that Mike Boynton finally got his flowers. This is a guy that was named Oklahoma State's head coach back in 2017, wasn't a big splash hire, just a grinder. And what he did this season at Michigan very much went overlooked. Michigan was the number one defensive team in the country. They had the number one going into the tournament defensive rating, according to Ken Palm, in an adjusted defensive efficiency. And then that's been Mike Boynton's calling card. Like at Oklahoma State, in 2022, they were top 4 in defensive efficiency. They held teams to less than 40% shooting, which was top 15 in the country. And it wasn't just that year. And he got hired right after the 8-24 season when Dusty May came in, went 27-10 last year, and this year they win the national championship. And he's really like their defensive coordinator, kind of the architect behind what they did defensively. And later on, we're going to play a little what-if scenario game. Sometimes, and I like Steve Lutz, I think he's the right guy for Oklahoma State, but Mike Boynton really didn't get a fair shake when it comes to this NIL era because he didn't have the buy-in, and NIL was very new, and he was in year 7, and they said, hey, we need to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, I think Boynton had some really bad luck at Oklahoma State. He was a top assistant for Brad Underwood, so when Underwood left and bolted for Illinois, he was the perfect replacement for him, and now when you look at him as an assistant for Dusty May, I mean, he's worked for 2 extremely reputable coaches, and hope that he gets another opportunity. I mean, it's been well documented, some of the bad luck that he had, and most notably the postseason ban centering around things that happened before he got there.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, the Cade Cunningham recruitment, I think, was a huge success. But, look, I mean, Oklahoma State basketball has had issues, for a decent amount of time now. In terms of consistency. And this is a program that was extremely consistent, under one of the great head coaches of all time, quite frankly, and basically since then has not been nearly as good and consistent. So, Look, I do hope Mike Boynton gets another shot. I thought these were great quotes that he gave Matt Norlander. If you know Boynton at all, he's extremely personable, really outgoing and friendly guy, but he's also no nonsense. And, so these quotes make a ton of sense. And look, when you win, there's two things that happen. One is other teams complain, and then two, everybody looks at your blueprint and tries to duplicate that. And, I think there's probably a little bit of elements you could take from both, but most notably, neither are exactly true. It's the bigger story to me is the transfer portal itself, where you've got anywhere between, let's say, 1,000 and 2,000 players that have entered the portal in the first 24 to 48 hours since it opened, and that's just a number that continues to explode year over year. I think if the number gets to 3,000, which is what some of the projections are, that would be a 30% increase in portal entries year over year. And when you think about that, there's probably just north of 5,000 scholarship players at the D1 level, and 3,000 of them could end up in the portal over this cycle. That is an alarming number. And there's always the Flory Badungas of the world who will not have any risk of transferring down. There's a pretty high percentage of those guys that will end up transferring down. Some for good reason, probably need to be at that level, but many because the musical chairs caught them in a situation in which they didn't have any chairs to sit on. It's just sort of funny because we talk all the time and complain about how the feeder systems of that D2 group of 5 level, and yet here's an example of sometimes guys make the wrong decision and that could end up backfiring where they end up going to the group of 5 level even though they may be power 5 players. So it's sort of interesting that people complain about both sides of it. Like, oh, it's bad that it's a feeder system, but at the same time, you've got too many guys going to the portal, and yet that means that ultimately there are guys that will end up, transferring down to a level that they may be better than.
There are currently 2,901 players. Now, the portal opened about 15 hours ago, and if this number is true, because
where's that number coming from?
Shane Tuttle with the NCAA, and a lot of guys are running with it, and that's what I was getting to. It's also, let's throw a bunch of random numbers out there and see what sticks season. Every media outlet on the planet is trying to get the scoop on the portal. There's only 5,600 Division I players total, so about half of the pool is in the portal. And if that number is accurate, to your point, it will be possible for teams with low NIL funds to build a really solid roster. The Boynton stuff is super ironic to me because, Boynton's not the guy you want to target, the guy you want to mess with when it comes to tampering allegations that aren't true. Back in 2022, Boynton was one of the loudest voices when he was at Oklahoma State, saying that tampering in the portal was rampant and going unpunished. Oklahoma State was losing a ton of guys year over year because of tampering, and then for people to come after him, he slapped it right back in their face, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, so that number is not accurate. However, there are projections that by the time the portal closes, there will be 3,000 players.
Which would be over half.
But Jeff Goodman from Field of 68 was estimating 1,600, so I think it's anywhere right now between 1,000 and probably 2,000. Give or take, maybe less than 1,600, maybe more, who knows? But yeah, ultimately the projection is that the number will climb to 3,000 before the portal closes.
Here's what Jay Billis said about schools having one thing in common.
It drives me crazy when people say, well, we used to talk about education. What's stopping you from talking about education? If a player's not interested in education, then don't take the player. And if you don't like transfers, don't take transfers. But you know what everybody wants to do? They want to win. None of these schools is going, we have the highest GPA. They're going, we've been to 6 Final Fours. They want to win, and they're going to pay what's necessary to win.
Do you buy that? Can schools really say we don't take transfers? We're not interested in this transfer. You have to take transfers to field a team.
Well, yeah, and I think Billis's ultimate point here is, that let's not say things that aren't true. That's basically what he's saying here. Let's not just repeat lines that sound really good that aren't actually true. And we hear that a lot. Why aren't we talking about the education piece? Well, because you're not recruiting based on the merits of education. right? You may be saying, "Come here and get a great education," but you're not, you're not recruiting that player because of their abilities in the classroom, right? I mean, the motivations behind this are incongruent with some of the messaging from it, and I think that's what Jay Billis is calling out.
The number one player in the portal is Flory Badunga. He's got an upcoming visit to Louisville. The other headline that we touched on just for a quick moment is that Texas Tech guard Christian Anderson has declared for the NBA draft. Were you surprised by that move?
No, I mean, look, I think what's good right now is players have, multiple options at their disposal where they can test the draft waters and see what it looks like. Christian Anderson will compete at the combine and see what his projections look like. I'd imagine teams, have a certain feeling on him, but based on the groin and whatever else he was dealing with, they want to see what he looks like when it comes to the combine. But no, I mean, it's not surprising at all. I think guys want to exercise as many options as they have. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is like with all of the numbers in the portal, and some of these guys are playing a dangerous game, but a lot of them just want to gauge what their actual market value is. I read about Bryson Tiller. Basically, he was trying to gauge what his market value was. Well, that's great, but like what happens when you go back and what Kansas may have been offering previously is no longer on the table, and suddenly, in trying to get market value, actually just reduced your market value because this team said you're worth X and then didn't offer that, and then you want to go back and suddenly what you thought was your market value is worth Y. That's all part of the game. And, I think like we try to make blanket statements about how many players in the portal and how many of the percentage of those, and like it's incredible the increased number that we're seeing. And I think what that means is much more of a buyer's market than a seller's market. And, again, I think like as we complain about what's happening at the group of 5 level, which we shouldn't because we're at the power 5 level and we're, beneficiaries of it, as much as you complain about that, like 3,000 players in the portal means that there are guys that are going to get lost in the shuffle that will end up at schools that will help those schools in NCAA tournament bids where they probably should have been at the Power 5 level.
Right. Former Villanova star Josh Hart was quote tweeting all these portal numbers and said, we need 2-year contracts. Well, they're doing that at Baylor with Isaiah Johnson, the point guard who a couple of weeks ago he inked a 2-year contract at Baylor. So once these deals get put into place, I can't wait to see what these contracts look like, and are more teams following that lead with 2-year contracts trying to stem the tide that is the transfer portal.
I mean, how did the 2-year contract work out between Baylor and Rob Wright? I mean, the issue there is going back to the collective bargaining piece. These contracts are not enforceable. And, you'd like to live in a world where you sign a contract and you're held to that contract, but that's not happening. And guys are being advised by agents to use the leverage they have and basically saying like, yeah, you've got a 2-year contract, but we think you're worth more money in year 2, and they paid you for year 1. We're good. You gave them the services. They paid you for year 1. Now let's go see what's out there. And if the school tries to sue, it gets held up in court, and players end up going to play or elsewhere and, move on with their lives before it's ever settled. So this is where I say, like, the collective bargaining agreement is not great for the players. Like, they would no longer have the leverage to do that. You sign a 2-year contract in a collective bargaining agreement, and you've bargained that agreement has the stipulations that everybody agreed to, and it's enforceable, and way more to the degree that it, isn't right now. So, again, I think collective bargaining wouldn't be great for the athletes, but it would certainly make things a lot smoother in terms of creating uniform rules. Getting there would be extremely difficult, as we've seen so far.
Right.
But once we get there, it'd be better for everybody.
Yeah.
More so for the administration and for the schools, which is why I don't know why they're not pushing for it more, other than the idea that, they don't want them to be employees. Well, you got to get over that.
Totally.
Like Jay Billis said in that discussion that you just played, like, it's been professional sports for a long time. Once TV got involved, that's when it became professional sports. We can call it whatever we want. You can dress it up and make it look however you want, but there's still lipstick on that pig, so to speak.
Yeah, well said. All right, coming up next, it's our final Big 12 men's basketball power rankings, and then we've got senior writer for Yahoo Sports, Ross Dellinger, coming up in about 20 minutes. He's Ari, I'm James. We are powered by Modelo on a Wheels Off Wednesday here on Big 12 Radio.
against Buka. The tip is controlled by Utah in school history.
And that's something they definitely want to change, and I guarantee you if they can do that again, if they can do that too.
Another missed shot. Haggerty speeds up into the front court. Haggerty will kick to Castillo. Another three from the corner. It's good. 3 in a row.
He plays with his food. McHenry, I've watched him play a lot at Woodson, Kentucky, scoring a lot of points. That young man can.
Yeah, he started his career at Division II Hawaii Hilo.
Again, getting opportunity.
Luka thought about it.
Don't do that.
His game. And the steal by Brown into the open floor. He'll head to the rim, and he'll slam it home.
Grab it, pick it up.
To the corner, Kostic with a shot fake again. Johnson wide open for 3. It's good!
You take him down a little bit lower, give the screener a chance to get stationary, but once again, just a tough call right there. I'm telling you, these guys are coming out.
Have really changed things as Kyle now goes on to Michigan as Brown with another steal, heading it and slams it home. And the lead is up to 3 for Utah. Traore slicing right through the defense, lost it. Okonkwo doesn't get the roll, battling for the loose ball. Castillo has it to Haggerty, running against Brown. Haggerty gets Brown off his feet, count the bucket. Savvy, smart offensive player.
Where's he from, Tom?
He's from H-Town. I've learned to look and see who's from Houston and who's not. Johnson, the alley-oop to Haggerty, and as he's going down, he lays it off the glass. 6.7 to play. It's Brown running up the floor. Brown, 4 seconds left. Brown for 3. It is no good. Haggerty with the rebound. That's it. Kansas State hangs on.
Big 12 today here on Big 12 Radio. We are brought to you by our friends at Modelo. And in the third hour of the program, we will continue with our full court review series, Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps. Yesterday, we highlighted the Utah Runnin' Utes, and today we'll focus on Kansas State. You'll hear from new head coach Casey Alexander, who comes over from Belmont, and then Ryan Gilbert from Go Power Cat will be joining us later on the show. But this is our Power Rankings segment, final Big 12 men's basketball Power Rankings, 1 through 5. Ari Timken, Taman with the intro.
Number 5.
There it is. Number 5, who do you got?
Texas Tech is number 5 for me, and the case for me was Tech or Kansas. And so based on the fact that they have identical 12-6 conference records, their seeds were 1 apart. The volatility was the story here, and that's why I had Tech over Kansas at number 5. I'm not going to give you credit for what you might have done for Kansas. And look, I think their season was not great. But for Tech, you can make the caveat of injuries completely derailed a potential Final Four run. I don't think there was any potential Final Four run in Kansas, which is why I had them number 5, Tech over Kansas. They set a program record with 384 made threes, 4th nationally in three-point percentage. And again, their loss to Alabama was more to me about injuries than anything else.
So you've got Texas Tech at number 5, which is where I have Texas Tech for a lot of the same reasons. You know, it was a really weird season for Texas Tech because pre-JT Toppin injury, they looked like a team that I thought would be in the Final Four. Then he gets hurt, then they hit a speed bump, and then they recover, and they picked up some quality top 25 wins, including a road win at Iowa State without him. But once Christian Anderson tweaked the groin, Bamboye kind of hit his wall after he'd battled through injuries all season long. I felt like Texas Tech just flat out ran out of gas. So I've got Texas Tech at number 5 as well.
Number 4.
Number 4 for me is TCU, a team that started 0-1 at home and to a loss to New Orleans, rebuilt their identity. They finished 11-7 in the Big 12, then knocked off Ohio State. They're out of 64 as a 9 seed. An extremely compelling season. For me, like, TCU is the most underappreciated program in a conference that's loaded with big-time names and big-time brands. I don't know that Dixon gets discussed as much nationally as like a Samson, Otzelberger herself, and probably for good reason. But to not even be mentioned, it feels like when we talk about some of the best coaches, is probably a huge miss on our part. And I mean, look, I think this is a team that got better over the course of the season. They maximized everything that they could possibly maximize about their roster and about their coaching. So for me, I put a lot of stock into what TCU did this season. Especially down the stretch of the year where they became a really good team. They became one of the hottest teams in the sport at the end of the year. I know Kansas beat them in the Big 12 tournament, but again, I just thought based on expectations, based on how the season started, TCU finished on a high. Kansas did not. TCU 4.
Man, I love that. I love that you have TCU right there, because if Jamie Dixon doesn't get called for a Bush League technical in the early stages of the second half against Duke, that game maybe plays out very differently. Love that pick. I do have Kansas at number 4, 12-6 in the Big 12. They had the number 1 toughest schedule in the country, according to Ken Pom. I know it feels like they underachieved when you have arguably the best player in America. But with that said,
doesn't feel like it. They did underachieve.
Yeah.
They had like a 60th Ken Pom offense. That is the definition of underachieving, with the number 1, number 2, number 3 pick. One of the top 3 picks in the nation.
Especially with the expectations every year coming in. You brought in a sharpshooter in Trey White. Melvin Council was really good, maybe the best point guard in the league at times, and then he really kind of faltered down the stretch. So it was a really, like a lot of these teams putting this together, and these teams had rocky seasons like 4 through 8 in the Big 12, but I put Kansas at number 4 because they were closer than Texas Tech was to being in the Sweet 16. That buzzer beater by St. John's, if it rims out, if Kansas manages the fouling situation different down the stretch, maybe KU's in the Sweet 16. I've got KU at number 4.
Number 3.
Number 3 for me is Iowa State, and this one's tough because I think Iowa State was actually better this year than Houston was. The problem was, they weren't able to prove it because of the Josh Jefferson injury. But credit to Tamin Lipsey in what will end up as one of his final couple of games. He put up his best game, 26-10, carrying Iowa State past Kentucky into the Sweet 16. He willed his team to the Sweet 16 without Joshua Jefferson, and then obviously they couldn't knock off Tennessee. And yeah, I mean, when you look at TJ Otzelberger, what he's done, he's turned Iowa State into one of the most reputable and consistent programs in the country. And despite losing a ton of these players, you expect them to be right back here again next year. Iowa State number 3 for me.
Yeah, I've got Iowa State at number 3 as well. 29-8 overall. Finished top 8 in the country in the final AP poll that just came out. And they're in the Sweet 16, which is one round further than Iowa State made a season ago. This, to me, like the Big 12 was the year of injuries and just bad luck, because I don't think it had anything to do with the strain of a league schedule that it is the most physical league in America. But remember, last season, the Big 12 played 20 regular season games. This year, it got trimmed to 18. Teams had more bye weeks. I look at the injuries and the way they occurred, and it just felt like really bad luck to me. So I've got Iowa State at number 3, and a what-if scenario if Jefferson doesn't get hurt, because I do think they're maybe in the Elite Eight, maybe the Final Four if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I actually screwed this up. I should have had Houston number 3 and Iowa State number 2.
Oh, okay.
So I just gave you the whole reason why I thought Iowa State was a better team than Houston, but have them lower in the power rankings. No, because, again, like, Iowa State and Houston end up both losing the Sweet 16. Houston didn't have the injuries to fall back on in the same way that Iowa State did, which is why I have Iowa State at number 2. Thank you, Anthony. Because I amended my list, but then didn't amend it for myself. Sent Anthony an amended list, but did not remember to actually execute on that. At any rate, go ahead, Taman.
Number 2.
Thank you. Iowa State number 2.
Guys, let's pop some gum. I've got some Trident. Let's fire up that gum. Okay, number 2 for me, I've got Houston at number 2, and I went just based off of who they lost to in the tournament. I thought it was splitting hairs between them and Iowa State. Houston lost to an Illinois team that went on to the Final Four. It's crazy that Houston kind of had a down year, like defensively in terms of their rating, and they were still top 7 in the country and second nationally in scoring defense. Losing to Illinois in the fashion that they did, like never really being in that game in the second half, was definitely a letdown, but they still had a hell of a year. I've got Houston number 2.
Number 1.
Yeah, Arizona, the Final Four participant. I think we obviously watched them all year and probably thought a little bit more highly of them than we should have, given Michigan did a lot of the same things as Arizona, but just did them better. And that ultimately, as I go back and look at where I missed on predicting that game, it's that I had put too much stock in what Arizona did and didn't look at the fact that those were similar teams. Michigan just did it better. Period. End of story. Yep. But beyond that, unbelievable season for Tommy Lloyd in Arizona. They needed a Final Four trip. They got it. Obviously now the expectation is to go further to win a national championship, but he did what he needed to do after putting up, the most wins for any coach ever after 5 seasons.
I've got Arizona at number 1 as well. That's it. Final Four team. End of story. All right, Taman, what are we randomly power ranking today and why?
We are randomly power ranking the what ifs in life and in history and what could have happened. What if, COVID had never happened? What if, the NCAA tournament had played? And why we're doing it is because, what is it, National something day?
It's the anniversary.
Glad we asked Taman for this. This was it was a dynamite idea.
Taman did not do his homework. All right, Ari, why are we randomly power ranking?
Because on this day, April 8th, 1994, Michael Jordan made his debut for the Birmingham Barons, the AA affiliate of the Chicago White Sox. And so it came up, what if moments, what if Michael Jordan had never retired? So let's power rank the top 5 what if moments of all time, sports or otherwise.
What do you got at number 5?
What do I have at number 5? Number 5 for me is the tuck rule.
Ooh.
So, when we think about the what-if moments of sports, it feels like one of the most consequential officiating decisions in modern NFL history. So, Tom Brady appears to fumble the football in a playoff game against Oakland. The Raiders recover. The Patriots season ends. No Super Bowl run. Would Bill Belichick be considered what he's considered? I mean, would Tom Brady be considered what he's considered? I mean, because at that point, Belichick was sort of on thin ice. I don't know that would have led to him being ousted as the head coach at that point in time. But, I mean, the Raiders would go to the Super Bowl. The entire 2000s NFL landscape rewrites itself if the Tuck rule goes the other way. So, in sport, and then, obviously then having to redefine what a throw is. Did he tuck the ball, or was he in the prospect, was he trying to throw the ball? So I think all of that plays into how insane that call was that went the way of the Patriots.
An iconic moment. Love it. Number 5 for me, what if Mike Leach doesn't get fired at Texas Tech? Is Texas Tech today? Texas Tech fired Mike Leach one day before he was owed $800,000 in a bonus and over $1.7 in guaranteed money. And remember, it came after some controversy. A player was accusing him of mishandling a concussion. The player ultimately wound up in a shed during practice. But Leach won 84 games in 10 seasons, and it took Texas Tech about 2 decades to try and recover from the Mike Leach dismissal. Texas Tech had not been back to a New Year's Day Bowl since his departure in 2010 until this year. It's taken them a long time to get back to this level, and I just wonder if Leach had never been let go, would they have been more consistent? And he would have had Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback and not Cliff Kingsbury's.
Number 4.
Good call there. What if Barry Sanders doesn't retire at 31? He retired just 3,000 yards shy of breaking Walter Payton's all-time record. And, had he continued playing deep into his prime, he may have set a record that Emmitt Smith would have not been able to break. Plus, who knows, some of those bad Lions teams that he played on, if they had, eventually been able to get a quarterback, maybe they would have had more success. But we think about the landscape of the running back position, and we talk about Emmitt Smith, Walter Payton, and Jim Brown. Barry Sanders is mentioned, but it feels like huge what if with him in terms of his overall numbers.
Love that pick. He was 31 when he retired, like you said. That's amazing. All right, number 4 for me is the 2020 NCAA tournament does not get canceled. Not saying that not trying to downplay COVID by any means, but if that tournament's not canceled, the Big 12 has another natty. Kansas wins it all. They were the best team. They were 28-3. They were 17-1 in a loaded Big 12. And the other 1 seeds were going to be like Florida State, Dayton, and somebody else that's not a traditional blue blood. I felt like that was another year that KU would have won a title with Marcus Garrett and Devon Dotson and Azubuike. Kansas came back and won it in 22, but they could have had 2 titles in 3 years. That's dynasty talk.
Number 3.
Number 3 for me is what if Len Bias doesn't die? And this is sort of both sports and life because of the implications after Len Bias passed. Len Bias, all-American, all-everything player in the 1984 draft, drafted by the Boston Celtics, big-time player at Maryland, who died from a cocaine overdose the night of the draft. And it's not just a basketball tragedy. I mean, it directly caused one of the most consequential pieces of domestic legislation in the last 40 years. The mandatory minimum sentencing laws that reshaped the American criminal justice system basically exist because of the national panic triggered by his overdose. So not just a basketball story, but a story that really hits hard in terms of the criminal justice system.
Number 3 for me is, and this is probably burnt into my brain because we just are fresh off the Final Four. What if Gordon Hayward's shot for Butler against Duke in 2010 goes in? The half-court heave that just rimmed out. Brad Stevens, who's no longer the coach at Butler, now he's in upper management in the NBA. If Butler wins that game, what if he sticks it out at Butler? What if he continues to coach, proving that a mid-major can win a national championship? Butler had also beat Kansas State in the Elite Eight that year, so that would have given like K-State fans one more. Hey, they just won the Natty, but a small school in Indianapolis is a 5-seed mid-major. If they win the Natty, does Duke's dynasty look different? Does Brad Stevens become this coaching legend that is basically the new Gonzaga in the modern era?
Number 2.
Number 2 for me is what if Michael Jordan never retires? And, I mean, this could go either way. What if he retires and doesn't come back? Or what if he never retires? Because if he never retires, does he win 6? Does he win more? Does he win less? He said multiple times that basically that helped to refocus him and re-energize him. He's beaten down by the sport at that point, beaten down by all the media and everything, and maybe his ego needed to be reduced by playing baseball and kind of being the laughing stock of sports at that point in time. There's so many what ifs that come out of Michael Jordan's retirement. So it feels like he doesn't win 6. Obviously, if he retires and stays retired, or if he doesn't retire at all. Maybe he was just fatigued by the whole thing and wouldn't have won 6. Michael Jordan retiring is a huge what if moment in sports, obviously.
I think he would have won a lot more, definitely. All right, number 2 for me is, what if Oklahoma State gets in to the 2011 BCS National Championship game? Remember that team with Brandon Whedon and Justin Blackman? They were the number 3 ranked team in the country, and Alabama got in and played a rematch of a game against LSU, which still to this day is the 3rd lowest TV rating ever in a BCS championship game. Nobody wanted to watch it. It was low scoring and gross. And the margin between Alabama and Oklahoma State is still the slimmest margin ever.
Wow.
Between a number 2 and number 3 team in BCS history. What if Oklahoma State got in? What if the Big 12 had that national championship? Does the conference look different?
Number 1.
Number 1 is more world history because it basically knocked us back in human history and our enlightenment thousands of years. The Library of Alexandria housed an estimated 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls, the accumulated knowledge of the ancient world. It was destroyed in stages, and basically in the destruction of the Library of Alexandria, many ancient texts from Aristotle to Archimedes and then hundreds of others that we don't even know were destroyed and lost forever. So when you think about like how much earlier we may have had an enlightened period, the Industrial Revolution, all these things could have happened way earlier in world and human history had the Library of Alexandria never been destroyed. So that's like a deep, deep one along with sports, but felt like it was really important and nothing could top that.
I love that one. Love it. I got to send you the pod I'm listening to. We'll talk more about it later. Number 1 for me, this one just hits close to home. What if in 1998 Kansas State gets a stop on 3rd and 17 from the 42-yard line and they don't lose to Texas A&M in the Big 12 championship? K-State was the number 1 ranked team in the country going into that game and led 27-12 midway through the 4th quarter. They whittled it away, to put it PG-friendly. K-State lost, but the Big 12 with that Oklahoma State season, and K-State could maybe have 2 more national championships because they were the 2 best teams in the country and didn't get a chance. All right, coming up next, Ross Dellinger, senior writer for Yahoo Sports. The latest on all the revenue disparities in college football, what's happening at the highest levels. We'll talk with Ross after this timeout. This is Big 12 Radio, powered by Modelo.
'60s, maybe even the '50s, and K-State will want to get up and down the court. Johnson guarded by Moore, 5 on the shot clock. Johnson off the window and down for Nate Johnson. Castillo doing a good job on Huff so far.
Yeah, a lot of attention on him with this lineup.
Moore steps into a 3. 19 in the road win at Creighton.
They did everything right on that road win at Creighton.
Chance Moore, a strong take. Now back to the dribble handoff to Nate. Kostic frees up for 3. Air ball and a hammer for Kamari McGriff.
Flicking it off his fingertips. You've seen Kostic just shoot the ball completely over the basket, and McGriff was ready.
Swatted by McGriff into the backcourt. Look at the hustle and the floater, and we are tied.
No way, Kamari McGriff. Can you get the ball into McGriff? They deny him with double teaming.
Floater from C.J. Jones. Rebounded Manning. Nate Johnson hits. Huge 3 from Nate Johnson.
That may be one we talk about in postgame. But West Virginia does respond quickly, and now
for 3. Back to for another 3. Count it, but it won't matter. West Virginia needing a win tonight.
Big 12 today here on Big 12 Radio, heard exclusively on TuneIn. Watched on Big 12 Studios, brought to you, the Full-Time Fan, by Modelo. We check in with Ross Dellinger, senior writer for Yahoo Sports. And Ross, fresh off the printer about 30 minutes ago, you noted that the NCAA is exploring a significant change to its eligibility rule. What can you tell us in terms of what's happening there?
Yeah, pretty significant things going on at the NCAA when it comes to eligibility. Obviously, eligibility has been sort of this vexing issue for the NCAA now for the last year or so, year and a half. And they've been trying to figure out ways to find a solution. And I think that solution has arrived, at least they believe so, is that they can create a new standard for eligibility. Basically, under the proposal, and it's just a proposal for now, it's supposed to get supposed to go before the NCAA Division I cabinet next week for review, not vote. So it could be a little ways before actual vote approval. But according to the proposal, players would have 5 years from their 19th birthday or their high school graduation to play college in college. There would be no waivers and no red shirts. There would be some exceptions like maternity leave, religious missions, and in military service. But outside of that, there would be no waivers, no red shirts, and there would just be 5 years to play, 5 years from the time that a player turns 19 or till he or she graduates high school, which would obviously be a significant change in two part. One, you're creating an age-based standard, which we don't have now, which is sort of leading to 25, 26, 27-year-olds playing in college, number one. And number two, the decision to eliminate the red shirt and waiver process is obviously pretty significant. That's a long-standing NCAA sort of avenue for players to, get or ask for, request additional years of eligibility.
Is this in line with the executive order from President Trump? And, do you think it would hold up in court?
It is in line with one of Donald Trump's concepts in the executive order. I think that though that is the case, the NCAA has been working at least a month, if not a month and a half, on this issue. So it's kind of been down the pipe. Actually, since the Trinidad Chambliss ruling, I believe in the middle of February, is really when the NCAA got going on trying to do this. But it does sort of check off one of the things that was in the Trump executive order. You could ask whether that's legally defensible about any NCAA policy, right, or any new NCAA policy.
Right.
They seem to be challenged around every corner. I'm sure they'll be challenged around this as well. It's just kind of a constant, it seems.
Yeah, the executive order that dropped on the eve of the Final Four, of those 10 pages that you had your hands on, is there anything in there that people haven't focused on yet? I mean, what are the main bullet points from those 10 pages?
It obviously instructs the NCAA to create several pieces of legislation. One is this one, eligibility of 5 years for college athletes. The second one would be to reinstitute the one-time transfer policy, where a player can transfer one time and then has to sit out a year. That one is a little more difficult to change because the NCAA was sued by several states, and the Department of Justice actually joined the lawsuit a year ago or so, or several years ago, actually, to prevent players from being restricted to move. So that's one that would be harder to do, you know. Another one that the executive order instructs the NCAA to do would be to ban pro athletes from participating in college. That's also a little difficult to do, but the NCAA's, especially with this rule change potentially, the eligibility rule change, age-based eligibility, I think sort of moves everything in that direction. So it, in some of the pre-enrollment changes that the NCAA's made over the last few weeks as well, sort of is a move toward prohibiting pro players from returning. I think there was a medical coverage in there. The NCAA already does that. There was also a ban on collectives or to prohibit pay for play in collectives. The College Sports Commission is supposed to do that. That's why it was originally started. And then I think, to really get back to your question, the main sort of one of the issues overshadowed is Donald Trump instructing the NCAA to create an agent registry for sports agents in college. That's harder to do because the NCAA doesn't have purview or oversight over like private agents. So it's a little more difficult to do. So some of these things that he's instructed can be done. Others are certainly more difficult, but the NCAA clearly is taking them seriously. I think they were reviewing all of the ways that they could address the concepts that he mentioned in the executive order.
You know, Ross, it's so obvious that all of this would be much easier if athletes were deemed employees and they could have a collective bargaining agreement. But at this point, the NCAA and member institutions are unwilling to entertain that, at least to the degree that it probably needs to be. What happens first? The NCAA and member institutions relent and make athletes employees and there's a collective bargaining agreement, or Congress passes bills that help to create structure around this?
Given the history of Congress and the current situation, which there's a lot going on in the world, I would say that you're probably, I would probably say that collective bargaining in employment, at some point, a group of schools or conferences will attempt to deem their athletes employees, to collectively bargain with them. I would think that would come first. I say that with in mind that there is more momentum and more conversation at the Capitol for some kind of legislation. It's just, there still seems to be a great divide on this issue between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans that want a more narrow college sports bill that leans toward the NCAA and perhaps restricts athletes a little more, versus the Democrats' thinking, which is to really not have the NCAA involved at all in oversight and have a government oversight of college athletics, plus have more athlete freedoms and things like that. So that's just the divide they're in, and it feels like while there's more conversation, they still seem to be far apart, but they're closer than ever. I just don't know what that exactly means.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. Last thing for me, Ross, is the NCAA tournament definitely expanding, and would that be for this upcoming season, 2027 tournament, or would that be a couple years down the road?
Yeah, it would. It would be. The thought is that it would be for this coming tournament, the next tournament, that it would be expanded. Most express pretty loud optimism that it will expand to 76 teams. It's not finalized yet, but I think by the end of the month it would be finalized.
By the end of the month, wow. Ross, appreciate your time, man. Sorry for the delay, and thanks for popping on this morning.
Yeah, no problem.
Ross Dellinger, senior writer for Yahoo Sports. Great stuff from Ross, as always, to unpack everything that's happening in the world of college sports at the highest of levels. Over 30 presidents, a ton from the Big 12. Met with a couple of senators the other day. He's all over that. Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports here on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. He's Ari, I'm James. Coming up next, college football headlines. One ESPN analytics guru loves what the Big 12 has done this offseason in college football. That's coming up next. We are brought to you by Modelo, exclusively on TuneIn and watched on Big 12 Studios.
Against Buka, and the tip is controlled by Utah in school history.
And that's something they definitely want to change, and I guarantee you if they can do that again, if they can do that too.
Another missed shot. Haggerty speeds up into the front court. Haggerty will kick to Castillo. Another three from the corner. It's good. 3 in a row.
He plays with his food. McHenry, I've watched him play a lot at Woodson, Kentucky, scoring a lot of points. That young man can.
Yeah, he started his career at Division II Hawaii Hilo.
Again, getting opportunity.
Buka thought about it.
Don't do
not
that.
his game. And the steal by Brown into the open floor. He'll head to the rim, and he'll slam it home.
Grab it, pick it up.
To the corner, Kostic with a shot fake again. Johnson wide open for 3. It's good!
You take him down a little bit lower, give the screener a chance to get stationary, but once again, just a tough call right there. And I'm telling you, these guys are coming out.
Have really changed things as Kyle now goes on to Michigan as Brown with another steal, heading it and slams it home. And the lead is up to 3 for Utah. Traore slicing right through the defense, lost it. Okonkwo doesn't get the roll, battling for the loose ball. Castillo has it to Haggerty, running against Brown. Haggerty gets Brown off his feet, count the bucket. Savvy, smart offensive player.
Where's he from, pal?
He's from H-Town. I've learned to look and see who's from Houston and who's not. Johnson, the alley-oop to Haggerty, and as he's going down, he lays it off the glass. 6.7 to play. It's Brown running up the floor. Brown, 4 seconds left. Brown for 3. It is no good. Haggerty with the rebound. That's it. Kansas State hangs on.
Big 12 today here on Big 12 Radio, brought to you, the full-time fan, by Modelo. He's Ari Timken on social at Ari Sports. That's ARI Sports. I'm James Westling on social at James Westling. Great stuff from Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports about the NCAA trying to rewrite the rule book on eligibility, who gets to play and how long. They're proposing 5 full years of eligibility from age 19 or high school graduation, whichever comes first. No more red shirts, no more waivers. And the waiver piece stood out to me because there were almost 1,500 waiver requests last year. 500 of those were denied by the NCAA. And then you had like the Ole Miss case and Tennessee and Alabama with Bediako. The NCAA spent $16 million in legal fees on these eligibility cases alone in the last year. So they're trying to nip this in the butt. Does it have legs, and what was your just kind of gut reaction?
Yeah, I mean, huge victory here for billable hours. And, you know, I mean, the NCAA continues to earn money from the NCAA tournament and then piss it down the drain trying to enforce its archaic rules. I'm sorry if that offends or upsets people. You've heard the saying, like, they're trying to build the plane as it's flying. In this case, you know, the NCAA is trying to build the plane as it's flying, but the plane is also on fire. So you're both trying to build the plane and reconstruct the plane while it's flying. And, you know, I mean, so it's going down and going up at the same time. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that makes total sense in my head.
It does in my brain,
actually. That's basically the way it is. Like, you know, they're constantly taking on lawsuits, which is why they're having to spend so much money on billable hours in court defending itself. They're constantly taking L's. You know, the fix is not through Congress because of the disconnect we just heard from Ross Dellinger between the Republicans and the Democrats, which I guess is how a functioning democratic society should work, where you've got two parties, both have disagreements, and, you know, need to find some sort of a middle ground in both of those. Ultimately, again, like, at some point, you're going to need to figure out that the only way to do this is through a collective bargaining agreement, and you may have to cut out the NCAA in order to do so. You know, but yeah, I mean, they're going to do this, and then they're going to get sued. And then they might say, well, okay, we're going to have a start date for this, right? Because how can you say this now in the middle of all this eligibility that's already been going with guys having to make decisions? Is it a retroactive thing? So let's just say you start, okay, in 2025, or excuse me, in 2030, whatever it is, 2027, that's where the clock starts for every incoming freshman. You know, 19, you get 5 years. There's a lot to figure out. But even then, you know, would they get sued for it by saying you've just created these arbitrary guidelines that have never existed? And, you know, and again, with the Supreme Court ruling that, you know, that you cannot limit benefits tied to academics, you know, does that invalidate that ruling? It seems like in most cases that is the case. So we'll have to see.
And the money angle really centers around the quarterback position, because Power Conference quarterback transfers this past cycle, the average going rate was around $4 million for new programs, and some even think that number is closer to $6 million. Guys that would have been mid to late NFL draft picks, the NFL rookie salary structure doesn't match those type of numbers. So even the financial smart play for those type of quarterbacks, like a Brendan Sorsby, who probably would have been a late round pick, is to stay in college. And the result of that are guys like Pavia and Aguilar and Chambliss and others fighting for that 6th or 7th or even 8th year of eligibility, because the money is so much better in college. And we're seeing it with the transfer portal now in college basketball, and guys on the fence whether they go pro and get drafted, pick 45, or they get paid $5 million to play another year in college.
Yeah, I mean, look, follow the money. And any industry in our society is indicative of that, you know? The more competition you have, the more money there's going to be for those jobs, the harder it is to get those jobs. And that's what you have here. You know, you've got a situation in which, you know, you are better than, as a league, any of these amateur leagues that exist underneath the NFL, but not as good as the NFL. But yet sports are such big business that it creates this opportunity and vacuum for guys to make money, one, and two, try to get themselves to the National Football League, where they can get even more money. it's so interesting because we talk about this stuff, and I think it's really interesting, but I'm not sure that like most people do. And it's like it's such a weird dynamic because I think people I've talked to, friends, colleagues, whatever, people, random people. It feels like everybody's in agreement here that like things need to change, that it's not sustainable or that there's issues, but everybody agrees like the players should be getting paid. At least the majority of the people I talk to, right? So like both of those things can be true. It's a imperfect system that has been made more perfect to a degree by allowing athletes to get paid. Ultimately, though, like the consumption shows something vastly different from the way that people talk about this. Like sports is still really good business to get into. It's why venture capitalists are pouring money into sports because they see how much growth there continues to be in sports as a business. And college sports is no different. It continues to grow. So despite the cries from the outside of this isn't sustainable, it's not fun, I hate this, the players are entering the portal every year, like despite that, there's still people in record numbers watching and consuming the sport.
ESPN just set a bunch of records for their college football viewership. The NCAA tournament was the most watched tournament since 1992. It was a $1 billion NCAA tournament. It's portal season. We'll get to the college basketball major names to know, as this is basically happening in real time as we sit here this morning. But Bill Connolly, who's one of our favorites from ESPN, SP+, he is the Ken Pom of college football, breaks down his favorite transfer portal classes. Last year, Indiana won the national championship by bringing in a semi-proven quarterback who had taken more than 40 sacks the year before. Miami gets to the final thanks to a 23-year-old quarterback in Carson Beck, who was a transfer. And then Ole Miss was led by a former Division II quarterback in Trinidad Chambliss. So he's not necessarily breaking this down based off of star ratings, just his favorite classes based off of fit, production, everything else. The number one class in the country, Oklahoma State. He loves Drew Mestamaker from North Texas and Caleb Hawkins and Wyatt Young. But even outside of that, he's got Colorado at number 3 in terms of his favorite classes. He's got Texas Tech at number 4. And then he has Kansas State at number 8. He has West Virginia at number 9 and Houston at number 11. So 6 Big 12 schools in the top 11, which is why our transfer portal series was so exciting to see all these big names that are going to be playing in the Big 12 next season. Ultimately, what does this say?
Well, it says a couple of things. Number one, it says, that the Big 12 is active participants in the transfer portal. It says that they're adding impactful players. It says that they need to add impactful players. When we went through, each of our spring previews and transfer portal rankings, a lot of these teams have tons of players that they're bringing in. I think the one that is maybe most interesting to me is Houston at 11, because Houston didn't add 40 or 50 players, whereas Oklahoma State and Kansas State, some of these other programs, West Virginia, Colorado, all had to add a ton. Texas Tech is also in that category in terms of having to add a ton because of what they lost. So for me, Houston, again, probably looks like they should be a Big 12 contender here. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick them to win the Big 12 this year, but given that they didn't need to totally overhaul their roster through the portal and yet still end up in the top 12 of this ranking, says a lot about the types of players they added.
The thing that I love about his list is it's very different from like 24/7 Sports or ESPN's composite actual team rankings when it comes to the star ratings and how they evaluate these portal classes. Like the highest rated team in the Big 12 is Oklahoma State when it comes to the composite at number 7, and then Texas Tech at number 10, and then Arizona State at number 15. Nobody else in the top 20. Colorado checks in at number 24 when it comes to the star ratings system, but his ratings and how he evaluates these classes goes much deeper than that. Colorado's the biggest surprise to me at number 3. He loves the Lamprey kid, the linebacker from Bowling Green. He loves Danny Scudero, the receiver from San Jose State, who had double-digit touchdowns and 1,300 yards. He loves Cam Perry from Miami, Ohio, who his yards per route was towards the top of the country. So a ton of credit goes to Dion, Coach Prime, and what Colorado's brought in this year. To be at number 3 was stunning to me.
Well, and I'm trying to find the same list that Connolly did last year once again to see where Indiana ranked. I'm finding one from Craig Harbert, April 29th, 2025, where Texas Tech was number 1 and Indiana was not in the top 10. And, you know, I think one of the lessons we should learn in terms of this exercise is sometimes past production doesn't necessarily equal future production. We just saw that with Michigan, right? I mean, the story of Michigan wasn't necessarily that their 5 starters were all transfer portal players. It was that you wouldn't have known before the season started that this was going to be the most impactful transfer portal class based on previous production. So I think we should probably adopt a similar strategy from football, right? It's not necessarily about the players you bring in, it's the fit. You know, we'll get to this with K-State, but, you know, K-State has had some really good portal classes. How's that worked out for them? Kansas has had some really good portal classes.
For basketball.
How's that worked out for them for basketball? So, yeah, I mean, and look, I trust Bill Connolly because, again, he's a good dude. He's got great numbers, great information, and I think the way he looks at it is he's balancing numbers with narratives. So he's not all numbers guy, despite his numbers being very accurate. But still, like, you know, I feel like there are so many elements here that we're not seeing that play a huge role in this. And, like, Indiana's the best example of it. I mean, Indiana football was not on the radar as a national championship contender as much this year as they were coming out of playing in the playoff the last year, because their portal players didn't jump off the page at you, the guys they added. But they added a very impactful portal class, and then, of course, it was the holdovers from from year 2 in that portal that played a huge role.
Colorado is number 3 on Bill Connolly's favorite portal classes in the country. There's 6 of the top 11 coming from the Big 12 nationally. Here's what Deion Sanders said about if building a program at Colorado has been harder than he expected.
I'm not going to say that. We made some tremendous mistakes at certain positions that derailed us a year ago. The first couple of years we had stability at those positions that highlighted us. So we learned quite a bit of not just talent, but understanding mentality. And mentality is something that we targeted. It's something that we sat down and interviewed and made sure not only the young men, but the parents had that type of mentality, because the parents play a tremendous role in these young men's lives.
So that's a very different approach from what he did 2 years ago when it was all numbers-based and we're going to get the biggest, strongest, most productive guys, the 4 stars, the 5 stars. This year, they zeroed in on the mentality piece, which is why a 3-star transfer like Danny Scudero ends up at Colorado, and he was super productive. Like, I love this approach from Deion, number 1, to adjust, and number 2, to find guys that, you know, it goes a little bit deeper with how hard they're willing to practice, the hours they're willing to put in film, talking with the families. I think this is money from Deion.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the more I hear, the more I like with Colorado this year. So, I mean, there's also some really interesting quotes coming out of guys that left the program. Jordan Seaton, you know, had some quotes coming out of, coming with LSU to talk about how he received more coaching in a couple of weeks at LSU than he ever received in Colorado. I mean, it's interesting. You stayed there, 2 years, and, didn't say that, and were a part of a really good team as a freshman, despite not having quote-unquote great coaching from your time there. And, I mean, you also had the quarterback who stepped in and started a few games last year for Colorado that said the similar things.
Ryan Staub?
Yeah, which is also like, oh, but he gave you a good – I don't know. It's weird. It feels like the more noise there is around Colorado's program from the outside, the better Colorado's program is. Last year, all the noise was positive, and now all the noise returns to negative, which for Deion's got to be a good spot for him. He likes to be in that spot because he's had a lot of success when people count him out.
Yeah, he actually addressed the fact that some of these former players have taken shots at the Colorado program.
Some of our past players have been commenting on us, which is cool with me. We're not going to be provoked to comment back or to say anything ignorantly back. I wish those guys the best. One thing that I could comfortably say, some people came here that you didn't know of, and when they left, they had a name. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud that they were able to earn more than they earned here, that could help their friends, family, as well as loved ones, and can help themselves. So I'm happy with that. We're still in good relationship with quite a few, but you got to understand some young men play the victim, and that's not the case. We try to treat everybody here with utmost respect and professionalism, and I hope we've done just that, as well as treating you the same way. But we would not engage in back and forth with any former players. Our aim is just to really please, support, encourage, motivate, and really prepare our men that we have on campus.
Coach Prime taking the high road.
Well, look, I mean, this isn't a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise. He's been consistent here. I think there are plenty of things to criticize about Deion, and we have, certainly, from the in-game coaching. I think at times lacked. I mean, the one game, it was an absolute disaster last year that we documented, that he then even didn't really walk back. I can't remember the game specifically, but it was just an awful end-of-game scenario with Deion. I think there's plenty to criticize, but the way that they handle players, the way they handle the portal, I'm not sure that you can be critical of it, especially when it comes to this stuff. And you'd think Deion would be the opposite, but he's not. And this is consistent. It's not like he's doing this for the first time. He has consistently taken the high road after consistently being criticized from players that leave the program.
That voice is Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. Coming up next, the biggest name from the Big 12 that just entered the portal, switching over to college basketball talk. After this timeout, this is Big 12 Today. We are brought to you by Modelo, heard exclusively on TuneIn, and you're watching us on the Big 12 Fast Channel, Big 12 Studios.
Up to the field side here, and he's home again! Changing up the look. The result is the same for David Bailey.
56% on the year on conversions. Jackson's in trouble and down. David Bailey, he is a sack machine.
More on 3rd and 8. Pressure and they get to him. He is sacked by the best in the biz, David Bailey. 14 and a half sacks now on the season. On this possession, but a huge smack in the backfield again. It's David Bailey walloping Jamarian Burnett.
Work on an empty here. 3rd down and 9. Kansas State. Oh, goodness. Look out. David Bailey, the sack leader in the nation, gets home again.
Cam Pickett is much healthier now and running better. You see it there.
Oh, good night. David Bailey in a heartbeat. He graduated from Stanford in under 4 years, and he runs like this.
Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio, brought to you by Modelo. Heard exclusively on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. We're about 15 minutes away from bringing in Matthew Postins, the Big 12 senior basketball columnist and writer for Heartland College Sports. Remember when we power ranked our top 5 favorite websites, and I had Heartland College Sports at like number 3?
Yeah,
like
not
Amazon, Google.
Yeah, not anything against Heartland College Sports. It's a great site that covers the Big 12. But yeah, I mean, to power rank all of the greatest website on earth and include that was an interesting decision, to say the least.
That was my welcome to Big 12 Radio moment. HeartlandCollegeSports.com.
That's a good website. Is it one of the 5 best of all time? Probably not. But, you know.
That's where I learned that sometimes we do our assignments and our homework a little bit differently. Amazon, fine. Yahoo, okay. ESPN, Heartland College Sports, Drake meme. So Matthew's going to join us here in 15. Well, I think our Modelo fan rule number 47, off-season optimism, is mandatory, now applies to college basketball because the ink wasn't even dry on Michigan's net-cutting ceremony for the national championship. At the crack of midnight, over 1,000 players have entered the NCAA college transfer portal less than 24 hours after it opened. Just a mass exodus of players in the portal. The latest, Rob Wright, BYU point guard, averaged over 18 points per game, I should say, is in the portal.
He'll have a lot of interest. You know, really good point guard. And you know, I mean, again, it's hard to sort of parse through which of these are he's actually looking to go versus looking to gauge market value and then go back and say, hey, this is what I'm getting. Can you match it? I'm also going to go elsewhere. So, yeah, it's we shouldn't be surprised by any of these names. Again, there's estimations that 3,000 will enter the portal out of, you know, a sport that has 5,000 players. So when you're talking about more than 50% of your players in the portal, there's only a certain amount of spots. You know, if there's 5,000 players across all of D1, not everybody can play at the Power 5 level, though I'm sure most aspire to. And I think in a lot of cases, you know, what's interesting is coaches probably put more stock into what you do, not more stock, but it's cheaper to go the route of the group of 5, to where, like, if you've scored 19 points at, let's say, a Central Arkansas, you know, but you're asking for $1 million versus a guy that scored 7 points at UCLA who's asking for $3 million, right? I mean, coaches are probably going to make the decision on the Central Arkansas kid, despite what Adai Mara just proved for Michigan. But yeah, I mean, everybody wants to gauge what their market value is, and I'm sure some of them have some semblance of it because of the rampant tampering that exists in terms of gauging market, but this gives them the best specific example of it. The problem is, you know, it's all fun and games in terms of gauging market value until you leave a spot and you want to go back and that spot's gone. Now, for a guy like Rob Wright versus a guy like Bryson Tiller, right, spots clear up quickly for Rob Wright, not as quickly for Bryson Tiller. Tiller really grew a lot this year, but, I mean, his spot's very easily replaceable.
KU's down to like 2 or 3 guys coming back. I think Rosario's the only one that actually played like meaningful minutes, if you want to call it that, that's returning next season. And they're not the only one. So you asked me towards the end of yesterday about Michigan and their blueprint, because Michigan, it's the first time in NCAA basketball history that a team with an all-transfer starting 5 won the national championship. Their top 4 leading scorers had all played at a different school the year before. That's never been done in the 80 years of the tournament. And we saw it, you know, pretty recently with Indiana in college football this past season. So do you think that helps or hurts the portal, or is it indifferent? Like, have they proven this new blueprint that everybody's chasing, kind of like Indiana did in football, or does it move the needle in any way?
I think the idea of a blueprint is ridiculous, if I'm being honest, because, I mean, so many games could have gone either way, and does that validate or invalidate a specific blueprint? Arizona, we talked all year and championed their blueprint and how much different it was than everybody else's. And maybe Michigan's a good example of not just from a roster construction standpoint, but the right blueprint, the zig when everybody else zags. I don't think Arizona lost to Michigan because of the players they recruited and how they recruited players versus Michigan. I think you can kind of tell yourself whatever you want if you're in this space to say, yeah, like here's the blue. Every year we've got a new blueprint, and whether it's a blueprint of how to win strategically or blueprint of how to build a roster. And I think what we find out every year is that the blueprint's changing. Yeah, I mean, you need to be able to play the portal. I think that's a given. Will we find that next year the team that wins the national championship will have 5 returning starters or 5 transfer portal players? I'm not so sure. And look, maybe if it is, then now we're talking about trend here. It's sort of like evaluating football, where like, all right, if something happens in one game, it can be an anomaly. If it happens over multiple games, it's a pattern. I feel the same way. Like, I think blueprint is such an overused, hyped up idea in sports, and like if you're a coach and you're chasing a specific blueprint, I would advise you to create your own blueprint. Because like it doesn't matter what your plan is as long as you have a plan. And like I feel like there's a lot that forget it. We're going to talk about Kansas State here in our hoops recap. I would say the biggest issue with the Jerome Tang era was not having a plan.
Because they had the money.
They had the money.
They had a top 10 roster. The last 3 seasons, all 3 K-State misses the NCAA tournament.
Right. So was K-State following the Michigan blueprint? I mean, you could argue they were, but when you look deeper, it was vastly different.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, we talk about blueprints. What is that blueprint? Well, you got to use the transfer portal properly, but you got to recruit the right guys. You got to recruit 2A players that have a chip on their shoulder. Now you get way to the more specifics, the minutia of it all, and then you realize, like, oh yeah, no, that blueprint's valuable. So, yeah, no, I mean, look, we will sit here after teams win national championships and try to digest on what we think is the next great way to build. And the reality is there isn't. There's plenty of different ways to build the championship roster. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as it were. Ultimately, it just starts with having a plan and then building on that plan. And, I'm sure Dusty May, when he came in and took the Michigan job, wasn't like, here's my plan, and I'm going to have these players that come into the portal, and I'm going to entirely rebuild year 2 in the portal, and that will be successful. Like, he had a sense of the type of style he wanted to play, the player he wanted to recruit. Our friend Joseph Duarte tweeted out a quote from Kelvin Sampson from a few years ago regarding the portal, and he says it still applies today, and I couldn't agree more. He said, quote, "You always put a worm on the hook and throw it out there and see what bites. But I'm not fishing in the same pond that everybody else is fishing in. I'm not fishing in the pond where there's 260 species of fish. I'm only looking for a guy that has this, this, and this. This, and this is the key."
Yeah.
I mean, that's the blueprint, right? But what is this, and this? That is dependent upon the type of system and program that you have. That's a cultural fit. That's a structural fit. It's a schematic fit. It's a social fit, right? Like, all of those things matter here. So to sit here and just be like, well, the blueprint is go find guys that are underappreciated at the portal and then bring them in, like, you're probably going to end up winning 10 to 15 games, not making the tournament.
A la Kansas State the last 2 years. I don't know about you. Skinning cats is so stressful. It's like, which way skin that cat? I look at this Michigan.
I think more stressful is killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Oh, that too. When I've got a stone, it's like, which bird am I going to kill?
Yeah, and why aren't I able to find more stones? Why is there only 1 stone here?
There should be 2. To me, this Michigan run is essentially the new Fab Five. Like Michigan 1992, Fab Five, 5 elite freshmen, 1 program, 1 identity, baggy shorts, bald heads. Michigan's 2026 version, 5 transfers, 5 different programs, but the formula or the blueprint is that Dusty May convinced 3 players who all played the same position at their previous school, center, to join forces at Michigan. And they became the first national champion ever with 3 players 6 feet 9 inches or taller as its top 3 leading scorers. That was the blueprint. That was the market inefficiency, as he brought in 3 really good scoring, passing, rebounding, running the floor bigs and complemented them with quick guards, and the result is a banner.
Yeah. No, I mean, and Yaxel Lenenborg was the last of those 3, and yet he convinced him that despite these 2 other guys that play the same position, that they would be better off for it. And I mean, Arizona, we've talked about, like, they leaned into the size piece. I think it's obvious if there's one huge blueprint to take away, it's size matters, especially in an era where there aren't a ton of teams with great size, and that wasn't a huge priority for the majority of teams. More than anything, that's a blueprint that I would take away, not necessarily on how to build a team, but building a team with size. And then it's finding the guys with the size and putting them in position to be successful. You know, there was a lot talked about the Michigan defensive schematics. They basically switched everything except for Mara.
Yep.
Mara did not switch and stayed in the lane. And so when you switch everything, what that helps the offense do is get guys in position where they can switch. So in a situation where you watch Mara on film, you want him away from the bucket. He's a really good rim protector. We talked about it in the lead up to the game, 3 blocks per game. So get him away from the rim and now put him in a pick and roll situation where he's got to switch. But he doesn't switch, right? Smart move by Dusty May. Switch everybody except for your rim protector, right? So it's not just about the size and not just about the recruiting. It's about putting the guys in the right position to be successful. Novel concept.
Ari Timken, James Westling with you here on Big 12 Radio. Coming up next, the way too early Big 12 basketball rankings for 2026-27 are all over the place. And Matthew Postins, the Big 12 senior basketball writer for Heartland College Sports, will join us to break down a bunch of different topics surrounding this league before our full court review. Modelo's Big 12 basketball team check-ins / recaps with Kansas State today. Matthews after the break. We are powered by Modelo here on TuneIn and Big 12 Studios.
Plays at the line of scrimmage longer. I think actually that's probably the way it's
Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. This is the Big 12 Conference. This is a different league. We dive into our Kansas State men's basketball off-season check-in, our Modelo full court review, Big 12 basketball team recaps. We highlight a different team each and every day here on Big 12 Radio. Matthew Postins, Big 12 senior basketball writer for Heartland College Sports, joining us now. Hey, Matt.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Man, the portal stuff is just insane. We see Flory Badunga the other day. We see Rob Wright in the portal now. You guys have a fantastic Big 12 tracker over at heartlandcollegesports.com, and feels like everybody's being hit hard by departures in the Big 12 and nationally, with like half of college basketball's field in the portal. But who are the teams that are top of mind for you in terms of most departures, most turnover, and how different they could look next year?
Yeah, I mean, Kansas, I think, is close to the top of that list with just the sheer number of guys that I think they were counting on to be a part of their team next year. Not just Flory, but Marco Jackson, Jamari McDowell. They're both in there as well. Bryson Tiller's in there. It's really interesting to see Kansas have the issues they've been having the past couple of years retaining talent. Anybody that's got a new coach, you're going to see a lot of turnover. So that includes Kansas State, Arizona State, Cincinnati. They pulled a guy last night. Bearcat Journal reported that they pulled the center from Utah State, David Uwezi. So that's their first pull of the transfer portal season. Looking at some of the other rosters, we don't know what Arizona, what's going to happen with Arizona yet, because they just wrapped up the NCAA tournament. I would suspect they'll lose a few folks, but I think the teams that were very successful this year in the Big 12 and successful in the NCAA tournament, that's going to be kind of a line of demarcation. You're not going to see them lose as many players as maybe some of the other teams might. Interestingly enough, I haven't seen UCF lose a player to the portal yet. It doesn't mean they won't, but right now they have about 9 players that still have eligibility remaining, and as far as I can tell, none of them are in the transfer portal yet. That's a really interesting development for Johnny Dawkins and the Knights.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was thinking kind of the opposite in terms of the teams that maybe didn't have the most success in the NCAA tournament or didn't make it, like West Virginia, Oklahoma State, UCF. It feels like they've done a good job in keeping guys in house. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, West Virginia's only lost a couple. Now, Oklahoma State's starting to bleed a little bit, and I think part of this has to do with the fact that they pushed back the portal window opening to yesterday, which I think overall is going to be a good thing for everybody. It allows coaches to focus on the tournament. It allows players to focus on the tournament and not have to make really big decisions while their conference tournaments and their NCAA tournament is still going on. I remember a couple years ago, Iowa State pulled Deshaun Jackson out of the portal between the first weekend and the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, and I don't think that was a tenable schedule. So I think part of what you're seeing now is, the portal is open. Players have had a few weeks to really kind of contemplate their decision, especially the ones that were kind of on the fence. And that's why Oklahoma State went from having 1 guy in the portal before the portal actually opened to now having, looks like 4 players now, including Anthony Roy, who's also going to go through the NBA draft process. That's another piece of this. Badunga, Roy, there's one more player that is going to go through the NBA draft process and go through the transfer portal. I think it's Haggerty as well. You're seeing players double dipping, so to speak, to kind of get a sense of where they might go in the NBA draft, but also kind of getting the lay of the land to see where they might land in the transfer portal.
Yeah, for PJ Haggerty, it'll be his 5th school in 5 years if he does indeed transfer and play college basketball one more season.
And to think at one point he was at TCU.
Right.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, TCU, Memphis, Kansas State, and there's somebody else in there, Tulsa.
Yeah, Tulsa.
TCU is a team that at least as of now, I don't see a lot of departures, and I see a lot of guys that still have eligibility, like Brock Harding, Micah Robinson, David Punch, Xavier Edmonds, basically their entire starting lineup. So anything you can add in terms of Jamie Dixon and trying to retain his roster?
Yeah, I mean they've got 5 guys in the portal per multiple reporting, and Lella Vicious is about to put his name in. Field of 68 reported that about 50 minutes ago. So I mean, it's like you get on the radio and stuff is happening, and it's barely even 10 a.m. on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So apparently, and he was their best 3-point shooter this year. So if they lose him, that's a bit of a blow for them. But still, Edmonds has already declared he's coming back. I think Punch is returning. Robinson's returning. They've got a really good pool of talent, even if they do lose Lola Vicious. I think part of what Jamie Dixon's been able to do the last couple of years is, we get kind of critical of him in January because it kind of looks like the same old TCU that's going to struggle in the Big 12, and then they seem to figure it out, and that seems to be his pattern. He gets a group of guys together, they go through some trouble in November and December, and then they sort of figure it out once conference play begins. It'd be great if they could keep everybody else they have, and maybe bring in a couple more 3-point shooters and maybe one more big guy. I think this is a team that a lot of folks look at as a team, if they can keep their core together, that could be a top 25 team next year, and maybe even like a top 4 or 5 team in the conference. I really like the way the roster's constructed. Edmonds is a terrific player. He really came on at the end of last year, and I'm really interested to see what they could do if they can keep the core of that group together.
What are some interesting names from a Big 12 perspective that you're kind of watching out for? I know you mentioned Flory earlier. Who are some of the other ones Big 12-wise you're looking out for from the portal?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see, Isaiah Harwell from Houston go into the portal. I feel like he's a guy that could really help them next year and be a big part of what they're doing. I thought Robert Wright was a really interesting ad this morning just because I felt like he was going to stay. Even if Debonsa goes to the NBA, as we all expect, he would be the #1 guy on that team. I mean, he would be the dog. And he's a great player, and he's in a great system. Sebastian Ranchik of Colorado is a guy I'm really interested to see where he lands because he's one of those really long, athletic, good shooting forwards that the NBA likes, and maybe he's just not ready for that just yet. But if he lands at the right program, I think he can level up his talent and be ready for that after next season. He can be a difference maker for a team that maybe is already like at the level of like a Texas Tech or a Houston, that kind of team. He could be a real difference maker for that kind of a team because of his length and his shooting ability.
Matt Postins from Heartland College Sports here on Big 12 Radio, heard exclusively on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. Matt, if you were taking a landing spot for Flory Badunga, would you take a Big 12 school or the field?
I think I would take the field, although I find the prediction for Texas Tech to be intriguing because we know that JT Toppin is going to be out for at least a good portion of next season with the ACL. I think there's probably a chance he could come back for the second half of the season, assuming he doesn't decide to just go ahead and go to the NBA, which I wouldn't recommend him doing, but he could decide to do. Grant McCaslin has a really interesting dilemma because he has to build a team that can play without Toppin for the first half of the year and then can play with Toppin the second half of the year, assuming Toppin can come back and play at the level that he was playing at before the injury. Badunga would help them do that. I think he's a good fit for what they do from a schematic standpoint. He proved to me that he can be more of a floor runner this year than he did earlier in his career. He's a much better defender and rebounder and a better scorer this year. The thing that I want to see from him wherever he lands is him to be able to create his shot more often. I think that's the next logical step for him, and I think that's what NBA scouts are going to tell him too. He's great on the alley-oop, he's great on putbacks, he's great on second chance points. What they're going to want to see from him next is his ability to create his own shot and score on his own more often. So wherever he lands, I think that's going to be the thing that his college coach is going to want and NBA scouts are going to want to see. But I think I'll take the field because you hear rumors about the amount of money that he's looking for, and I'm not sure any Big 12 team is going to pay that.
I'm curious. It's always fun to visit with Matthew Postins because Matthew does a great job of covering both men's and women's basketball. He covers everything for the Big 12, but women's basketball too. Would you look at this season on the women's side as a success for the Big 12?
I think you have to look at it on a success level in terms of getting another team to the Elite Eight. TCU got there for the second straight year. I think anytime you get any team that close to the Final Four, I think you have to look at it with some level of success. Given how deep I felt like the first 6 or 7 teams were in this conference this year, I think it was a little disappointing for me to see nobody else get to the Sweet 16. I felt like West Virginia had a good chance, especially since they were at home. Baylor's always one of those teams that can get it done, whether they're at home or on the road. Oklahoma State got a really tough draw out west. But I was expecting 2 or 3 teams to get into the Sweet 16, and TCU was the only one to do it. So if you're thinking about it long term and building depth within this conference that may not have been there a few years ago, this group of teams, they're getting closer and closer. But I think it's kind of a qualified success, just because I think this conference could have had a couple more teams in the Sweet 16. And when you think about it long term, now that the women are getting units, albeit not at the same level as the men are in terms of television units and money, the more teams you get, the further into the tournament, it helps your bottom line. So from that standpoint, it was a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, how about Audie Crooks in the portal?
Well, Audie can go anywhere she wants. I don't think there's a coach in the country that would turn down having her on their team. I've seen some people predicting Oklahoma. That would be a really good landing spot for her. They need a post. Jenny Baranczyk is a great coach. Anybody who paid attention when they were the Big 12 knows that. I see her landing with a program that's a top 15, top 20 program that has national championship aspirations. I'll throw UCLA out there because I think Lauren Betts is out of eligibility too, and they could use a center. And I think, Corey Close proved that, she can win a national championship, and she's got a great system for a player of Crooks's level as well. It's really disappointing. The whole situation at Iowa State's really disappointing because that's such a great program with, a great tradition. Bill Fennelly's done such a fantastic job. To see as many players as they have in the transfer portal, it's going to take them a couple of years to recover from that.
Matt, what's your go-to number one if your house is on fire and you can only grab one of those helmets behind you? Which one are you nabbing?
The Dallas Cowboys, but the very specific 1976 with the red stripe when they were celebrating the 200th anniversary of the U.S.
Awesome,
I feel like there's way more things he should be grabbing if his house is on fire.
Yeah, that's just I don't know. I went dark, but I'm a huge fan of the collection you've got.
They're all sitting here. A best friend of mine and I, we used to trade mini helmets for Christmas. I'd give him college, he'd give me pro. So I've got just about every NFL team on here. I don't have the 49ers for obvious reasons.
That is sweet. I love the throwback helmets. Matt, appreciate your time, man. Great stuff.
Hey, appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Matthew Postins from Heartland College Sports and heartlandcollegesports.com, where they have a live tracker breaking down every Big 12 men's basketball roster amid all the transfer portal chaos. Coming up next, more men's basketball, part of our full court review, Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps. We head up to Manhattan, Kansas to touch on the Kansas State Wildcats. You'll hear audio from Casey Alexander, the new K-State coach, and then Ryan Gilbert from Go Power Cat is with us here in about 25 minutes on Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio, brought to you by Modelo.
Against Buka, the tip is controlled by Utah in school history.
And that's something they definitely want to change, and I guarantee you if they can do that again, if they can do that too.
Another missed shot. Haggerty speeds up into the front court. Haggerty will kick to Castillo. Another three from the corner. It's good. 3 in a row.
He plays with his food. McHenry, I've watched him play a lot at Woodson, Kentucky, scoring a lot of points. That young man can.
Yeah, he started his career at Division II Hawaii Hilo.
Again, getting opportunity.
Buka thought about it.
Don't do that.
His game. And the steal by Brown into the open floor. He'll head to the rim, and he'll slam it home.
Grab it, pick it up.
To the corner, Kostic, little shot fake again. Johnson wide open for 3. It's good!
You take him down a little bit lower, give the screener a chance to get stationary, but once again, just a tough call right there. I'm telling you, these guys are coming out.
Have really changed things as Kyle now goes on to Michigan. Is Brown with another steal, heading it and slams it home. And the lead is up to 3 for Utah. Traore slicing right through the defense, lost it. Okonkwo doesn't get the roll. Battling for the loose ball. Castillo has it to Haggerty, running against Brown. Haggerty gets Brown off his feet, count the bucket. savvy, smart offensive player.
Where's he from, Tom?
He's from H-Town. I've learned to look and see who's from Houston and who's not. Johnson, the alley-oop to Haggerty, and as he's going down, he lays it off the glass. 6.7 to play. It's Brown running up the floor. Brown, 4 seconds left. Brown for 3. It is no good. Haggerty with the rebound. That's it. Kansas State hangs on.
This is Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio, exclusively on TuneIn, watched on the Big 12 Fast Channel, Big 12 Studios, as we go around the league, all our full court review, Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps, working from the bottom of the Big 12 standings all the way to the top, kind of a postseason breakdown early in the transfer portal cycle. Yesterday we highlighted Utah. Today it's Kansas State. Kansas State's Jerome Tang is out. Belmont's Casey Alexander is the new coach in Manhattan. Brings in a couple of high school kids that had committed to Belmont out of high school that'll be in Manhattan next year. K-State went 12-20 overall, 3-15 in Big 12 play. Jerome Tang was fired last month towards the end of his fourth season. It's a complete demolition in Manhattan. A bunch of guys transferring out, including Abdi Bashir Jr., who was K-State's best shooter and missed the tail end of the season with an injury. P.J. Haggerty has departed. David Castillo is in the portal, averaged over double figures, 10 points per game as a sophomore. So 6 guys have already entered the portal for Kansas State. What do you think went wrong for K-State this past year?
Well, I mean, defense, we can start there. They ranked 285th out of 365 Division I programs in defensive rating. They actually had a decent non-conference slate, but started 0-5 in conference play, and it was the first time in 3 decades they started 0-5, and it felt like this was a team that gave up once the calendar turned to January. And, yeah, I mean, it's hard not to isolate the failures of this year and failures of last year and then the year before that to Jerome Tang and his approach. I mean, he's built a series of mercenary rosters assembled from the portal with no sort of coherent system identity, cycling between pace philosophies, offensive and defensive priorities without a discernible through line across all 4 seasons. Right? Do you have a plan? No. Oh, okay, great. Here's a boatload of money. I mean, let me ask you this. What does a Jerome Tang team look like?
Pace, tempo, score the basketball at a relatively high clip, but struggle to rebound and defend.
Yeah.
His last 3 teams all had major issues on the defensive end of the floor. And last season, K-State didn't have enough dudes to score the basketball outside of P.J. Haggerty. One coach said the head of the snake was P.J. Haggerty. You cut him off and the whole body flails to death. K-State was 13th in the Big 12 in league games only in scoring offense. So they scored a bunch of points in the non-conference that helped that offensive rating and number, and then 72 points per game in league play, and only Utah allowed more points in Big 12 play. So just a whole plethora of things, I think, went wrong for K-State.
And in the year of the big man, the process that Jerome Tang went through in terms of the talent acquisition was basically 180 degrees away from where the winners were. And, I mean, you mentioned rebounding. Rebounding and defense was huge, and the rebounding issues for me are about the front court that they brought in. Who was their front court last year?
A rotation of guys.
McGriff,
Doreen Buka at the end of the year.
McGriff averaged 4 rebounds a game. Buka 3.3. That's the interior rebounding core for a Big 12 team.
Yeah. I mean, K-State.
Those guys averaged 7. They had their 2 guys averaging combined 7.
They were the worst rebounding team in the Big 12. -10 rebounding margin per game. That is a crater defensively. They also were the worst fouling team in the conference. They committed over 20 fouls per game, and they were the lowest volume free throw team in the league. They attempted just 12 attempts per game in league play only. So they were getting just beat up night in and night out. And to me, it started with the loss in the non-conference to Bowling Green. I mean, Kansas State had a Nebraska team that played in the Sweet 16 on the ropes. I mean, they had them beat in the non-conference. They had beat Mississippi State by almost 30. So, like, you saw signs that K-State was going to be better. They went on the road and they beat Creighton by double figures. But the Bowling Green loss is where you just saw opposite ends of the spectrum. And it's like this K-State team is close to crumbling. Get into Big 12 play, start Big 12 play, 1-4 or 1-5, whatever it was, and the rest was history. It was just a really bad year.
Well, and we've made it this far talking about some of the stuff on the court, and I think maybe most important was that sometimes the games themselves sort of served as a side story to the post-game press conferences for Jerome Tang that became the story of the season. The post-game theatrics for Jerome Tang were the stuff of legends this year. So the Bowling Green loss, that's where he came to the podium and said, "I don't feel very blessed." He had the quote about not being disappointed after a 34-point loss to Iowa State. He had the Cincinnati meltdown after blowing a lead or getting destroyed by Cincinnati. And that was the one where is that the one where he said that, yeah, he was embarrassed. They shouldn't be wearing the jersey. He was going to practice the next morning. I mean, feels like one long press conference, but basically there were 4 or 5 multiple instances this season of Tang sounding absurd and again not having a plan. Everything he said ran the gamut of, oh yeah, no, we'll be fine, to this is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's just sort of incredible, actually, when you think about how unprepared he was for the season, for games, and then for the post-game press conference.
So I just pulled up my K-State spotting chart for the NBC game I had when they played at Houston. K-State started the season 5-0. They had wins over Cal, Tulsa, who just played in the NIT championship, Mississippi State. After that, they went 5-14. They became the first Big 12 team ever in the history of this league to lose 3 straight home games by 24 or more points.
Wow. And
their road games were much better. Like, they had 4 road losses by 2, 5, 1, and 3 points. 11 combined points in 4 losses on the road. But at home, 3 in a row by 24 or more. They couldn't win at home.
And I think, the other thing is, if I were to summarize Jerome Tang's tenure at K-State, I'd say a lot of complaining. A lot of overconfidence and a lot of complaining. He complained about the rules changing. That was something that he talked about this year, the constant rule changes, and yet, hey, you're not the only one dealing with that.
K-State had a player that had been in the program for about a full year, but he hadn't played a game. He had joined the team at semester the year before, and he got denied his eligibility waiver. That was Tyreek Smith. And Tang was fired up about it.
Right. And, again, everybody else is dealing with the same rules. It hasn't changed for you and not changed for anybody else. So, he was kind of unable to make a coherent plan around the same structure that everybody else is dealing with. So it to me, just constant complaints. It was just this vacillation between confidence and complaining. And then you may be left with what we've been talking about here, wondering how on earth did they make it to the Elite Eight his first year? Well, from a defensive perspective, they got 2 really good players in Keontae Johnson, who had great length on the defensive end, and then a Marquise Noel, who obviously could really get after you defensively, and then holdovers from Bruce Weber.
Which Noel was. Marquise Noel was recruited by Bruce Weber, and that was his second year in the K-State program. All right, so K-State's got a new coach, Casey Alexander, over 300 career wins across 15 seasons, 10 consecutive 20-win seasons. He's averaged 24 wins per year his last 10 years at a mid-major at Belmont. He signed a 5-year, $17 million deal. His reputation is that he's one of the best offensive minds in college basketball, certainly at the mid-major level. Now he has to prove it in the Big 12. Here is Casey Alexander on how K-State might look under his direction.
Everything for me starts with style, like style of play, style of player, style of program, and we can get deeper into it, but the style of play kind of dictates everything else. If we're going to be a wishbone team, coach, we gotta have a certain number of guys. We're probably not going to do that, but if we were, it would look a little different, right? We want to be a style that is fun to play, fun to watch, fun to cheer for, and leads to wins. Obviously, we want to be high tempo. Every coach in the world is going to say they want to be high tempo, all right, and get up and down the floor. Not every coach can say they're typically in the top 25 in the country in that category per year or scoring per game. We want to be a high assist team. We want to be a really unselfish team. We want to get a lot of work done at the 3-point line, but we don't want to live and die at the 3-point line. We want to be really efficient outside the arc, inside the arc. Our team this year at Belmont was the number 1 effective field goal percentage team in the country. So we had great success offensively through the years, but we do it in an efficient way. It's not a track meet. It's just let's figure out how to get the right kind of players who have the right skills. Above all else, understand what it means to play together, all right? That want to share the ball, that understand what it means to be a great teammate. All the things that this day and age are a little tougher to come by, quite honestly. There's a lot out there that distracts from the business at hand, which is winning. But we want guys that are still committed to that, and that's exactly how we're going to build.
Style.
Yeah, Alexander sounds like the complete polar opposite of Jerome Tang. We just heard a pretty thorough offensive game plan, schematics, system, plan. So it's got to be refreshing for K-State fans to hear an actual plan and not just, a bunch of hogwash, quite frankly, that Tang would consistently spew. And look, the proof's in the pudding. He mentioned it there. They were the top team in effective field goal percentage, but basically have been top 12 nationally in 5 of 7 seasons in effective field goal percentage at Belmont. I think this is a team that is going to be good offensively based on the schemes and the players that coach has a plan for.
And it's no coincidence that the one guy for K-State that has announced that he is returning is Andre Kostic, who was their best three-point shooter. He had 3 threes late in the year when he finally started to see the floor against KU and Colorado. So in terms of fit, if you're looking for guys with good that can space a defense and shoot the basketball, he's probably the number one guy that K-State at least had on last year's team that can do that outside of Bashir, who battled injuries. And then he's maybe ahead of the game, at least in the portal, because he's got 2 guys that have committed. You know, he's got two guys.
Belmont?
2 guys that were committed to Belmont out of high school, I should say. So he at least has, you know, of the 13 spots, he's got 1 guy coming back. He's got 2 guys that had committed to Belmont, and one of them is a top 250 prospect who's a developmental guy that had offers from Ole Miss and Georgia Tech and Georgia before choosing Belmont. And then the other guy is Jalen Alexander, who's a point guard from Alabama, who was the Alabama State Player of the Year last year in high school. Top 200 player. He's rated at 180 nationally, according to Rivals, number 3 overall in Alabama. So he was considered the number 1 recruit in Belmont history. And then the other thing that Alexander's kind of known for is finding guys, developing them, and then getting them ready for their next stop. Jacoby Gillespie, who put on a show for Tennessee in the NCAA tournament, was at Belmont. Will Richard, who was part of that 3-headed monster that won a national championship at Florida last year, he was at Belmont. So he's got a lot of guys that he developed. Cade Tyson is another one, started his career at Belmont, then to North Carolina and Minnesota. There's a center that is at Ole Miss that averaged 11 points and 6 rebounds for them, that spent 1 year at Belmont. So he's done a good job of identifying 3-star guys that are really good players.
Yeah. You've been very optimistic about this hire, and I'm sure rightfully so when you contrast it with Jerome Tang tenure. Are there ways it could go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are. I would say if the players that you're bringing in don't develop, or if they're in the portal, like at Belmont, it's just a different game in terms of the NIL world. And so that's probably my number 1 thing is anytime in today's era a mid-major coach makes the jump, it's how do they now manage the money that they didn't have before. It changes the way you recruit. It changes the way you handle players and personalities and their families, and are they getting the minutes that they expect to be getting. So it's just a different game. And then defensively, yeah, I would say that, you know, one of the top offensive minds in college basketball, that part's great, but what is K-State's defensive identity? A guy that might have answers to that would be Ryan Gilbert from GoPowerCat.com. He'll join us after this timeout. It's our full court review, Modelo's Big 12 basketball season recaps highlighting the Kansas State Wildcats today here on TuneIn and on Big 12 Studios.
'60s, maybe even the '50s, and K-State will want to get up and down the court. Johnson guarded by Moore, 5 on the shot clock. Johnson off the window and down for Nate Johnson. Castillo doing a good job on Huff so far.
Yeah, a lot of attention on him with this lineup.
Moore steps into a 3. 19 in the road win at Creighton.
Hey, did everything right on that road win at Creighton.
Chance Moore, a strong take. Now back to the dribble handoff to Nate. Kostic frees up for 3. Air ball and a hammer for Kamari McGriff.
Flicking it off his fingertips. You've seen Kostic just shoot the ball completely over the basket, and McGriff was ready.
Swatted by McGriff into the backcourt. Look at the hustle and the floater, and we are tied.
No way, Kamari McGriff. Can you get the ball into McGriff? They deny him with double teaming.
Floater from C.J. Jones. Rebounded Manning. Nate Johnson hits. Huge 3 from Nate Johnson.
That may be one we talk about in postgame. But West Virginia does respond quickly, and now
for 3. Back to for another free, count it, but it won't matter. West Virginia needing a win tonight.
Daily conversation of the Big 12 here on Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio. Heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios, presented by Modelo. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling, talking Kansas State men's basketball with Ryan Gilbert, the managing editor from Go PowerCat and GoPowerCat.com. Hey, Ryan.
Good morning. How's it going, guys?
Well, I would say it's chaos in terms of the portal. My first question is, how many of these, I think there's 5 Belmont players that are in the portal, ultimately do you think land with Casey Alexander in Kansas State?
We'll see what happens, man. I wouldn't be surprised if, multiple guys end up following to Manhattan. But, it is so early on, I guess, officially in this process. So we'll wait and see.
If you could summarize what went wrong with Jerome Tang's tenure, how would you do that?
Oh, boy. How much time do we got, guys?
Yeah, for sure.
Man. It really started in year number 1, and when you have so much success and so many things go right, especially when you build a team out of the portal, and you kind of get in that mindset, you think that every offseason is going to be as those, upper 4-star players and getting them to your program. You get away from that. You have a new roster every season. Obviously clear that Jerome Tang wasn't the best in terms of X's and O's and running a program. If it were up to Alexander, he would want to be really good on offense, but you can't neglect the defense. So Alexander's aware of that, but you look at what happened at Belmont. It's no secret that the offense is where his team's bread was buttered, and so that'll be a focal point. And Andre Kostic does not at all help you defensively. He's got a lot of upside, just oozing with potential offensively. And, you just look at his shot and some of his mechanics. He's gifted. Now he's got a long way to go to develop physically, has to mature, but the pieces are there. And he didn't get, much playing time under Jerome Tang. And so we'll see what happens, just if he can get on the court, perhaps some better development. You go back to the previous talking point of Jerome Tang, like developing guys and getting the best out of them obviously was not a strength. And so Kostic can help there, but he's not a good defender. Why didn't he play under Jerome Tang? At the end of the day, for whatever reason, it was because he couldn't play defense. And so that's going to be something that Alexander's going to have to prove, among the many things that has to be checked, the boxes that have to be checked here in Manhattan, showing that your program can play defense, because you can score as many points you want. We saw that this past season with Jerome Tang, Kansas State, one of the, I wouldn't say better teams efficiently offensively, because they were taking a lot of shots, a lot of possessions, and so you get up and down the court, you are going to score. But the thought, kind of the approach of, the plan of attack was to score a lot of points. Kansas State was, I guess, in a way able to do that, but look what happened. A losing season, you only win a handful of Big 12 games, and so you got to have balance on both sides. And Alexander, I think there's a lot of confidence that offensively Kansas State's going to be okay at the very least, but defensively, if you can't stop the other team, you're going to have some problems in the Big 12.
Yeah, well said. Have we ever found the resolution here on the fired for cause situation with Tang? I mean, I know it felt like that was not going to happen, but was there any relief in the buyout, or do we know if K-State paid the full boat there?
Nah, it's been pretty quiet as of late. And if you guys remember the lawyer that Tang hired, I'm not an expert in any means, but he was all over social media within the first couple of days, and it seems like they were really confident, and then they got quiet, and we haven't heard much since from them. And around here, there really hasn't been much chatter. The latest, though, would be status quo, which is, they're probably expected to meet somewhere in the middle in that $9 million, ballpark, and call it good. Don't even go to court. But again, I'm the farthest guy from a legal expert, but that's my understanding.
Talking with Ryan Gilbert from GoPowerCat and GoPowerCat.com here on Big 12 today. Casey Alexander has 2 high school players committed to play for the Wildcats, and you wrote that one of them, Devin Hutcherson, could be the next Barry Brown, which K-State fans will remember that name. He was 2-time All Big 12 in 2018 and 2019. What do you see from Hutcherson?
Well, just first look at the physical build, right? He, kind of is the similar size as a guy like Barry Brown, plays maybe the similar position, style of play. And so just from the comparison standpoint, that one was, I think, pretty easy to come up with in my mind. But, why I like the comparison off the court is just maybe the potential to be that player that sticks around in a program for 4 full seasons. And that hasn't happened here in Manhattan. For our olders listening here, Mike McGurl was the last player who's stuck in this program and stayed and left and graduated, right? Closed out their collegiate career at Kansas State. So it's been a while since this program's had that. And if there'd be one guy to come in, along with, of course, Jalen Alexander, you'd think it would be Devin Hutcherson. And so just not only Hutcherson, but look alongside him. Barry Brown wasn't who he was without Dean Wade and Kamau Stokes in his picture. and they grow and they develop together. And that's the culture, that's the foundation that Casey Alexander wants to build, kind of wants to lay here in Manhattan, so that, maybe the first season isn't a roaring success, but at least there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot to look forward to as the years go on. And I think the more you look into this, obviously you want to win right away. There's no question about that. But, Andre Kostic, for example, only played one season at Kansas State. He's got his better basketball ahead of him, without a doubt. And, we talked about this on one of our podcasts yesterday. Like, Abdi Bashir is similar in that umbrella with Andre Kostic, that he's gifted offensively, can really shoot the ball, but is a liability defensively. The breaking point there is that he's got 1 year of eligibility left. Andre Kostic, on the other hand, he's only got 1 year under his belt. And so building a program is the goal, and Hutcherson and Jalen Alexander are prime examples of that. I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple months from now we talk and, we're talking about the roster that Alexander grabs out of the portal. Wouldn't be surprised one bit if it's a very young group. And, Jerome Tang, to his credit, his first off season, was full of youngsters, guys that could stick around for multiple years. Cam Carter, Naquan Tomlin, Jerrell Colbert. You could go down the line. There were, of course, some older guys, but they had a plan in place. And to tie this all together, right, you have that success in the Elite Eight. Okay, you bail on that strategy of building the program, and you think you can just win year after year in the portal. I think Alexander's very cognizant that even if he hits a home run in his first season, he's not going to run away from what got him to this level.
I know you kind of just touched on it there, but what do you think in the mind of K-State fans looks like success for year one?
You know what? Just for Casey Alexander to prove something, making the NCAA tournament would be huge. And I know that's such a cop-out, easy thing to say, but look at his time at Belmont. Very stable, you could say high floor program, but when it came time for the games to matter in the conference tournaments, he lost. And so that is, he's got to keep guys around. He's got to play defense in the Big 12. There's a lot of things that Alexander has to prove in Manhattan, but atop that list is go to the NCAA tournament, right? He would have been in there in 2020, but that obviously got canceled. But other than that, he's got a lot to prove in terms of winning the quote-unquote big games that matter the most. And so, you want, of course, Alexander to win in March Madness, but just get there. Prove that you can win enough games. And obviously in the Big 12, it's much different because you can win 8, 9, of course, 10 games, and you're in the field of 68, which might be the field of 70, whatever. That's another story, guys. At Belmont, right? Goodness gracious. What's this world coming to? You go, win 15 conference games at Belmont. You slip up once in the conference tournament, you're toast. And so it's a different situation, but go out and prove you can make the NCAA tournament because, bluntly put, guys, he has not proven that at all.
Ryan, are there anybody in the portal that K-State's talking to or planning to have on a visit or whatever that looks like for K-State? Any names you can share that can get K-State Nation excited about?
At this point, probably not, anything that anybody can, I guess, get excited about. On social media, there's been a few, guys that have heard from Kansas State and stuff like that. But, it feels like the portal's only been open for a split second. I thought there'd be much more news at this point, but it's been quiet on Kansas State's front. I expected more, but I guess they're being somewhat patient.
Well, I think it's been quiet nationally in terms of guys that have signed, right? Everybody's in the portal, but nobody's made a decision yet.
Yeah. And Kansas State, obviously Andre Kostic, from our understanding, I think is going to be the only one that does stay. So we'll see about a couple international guys, Elias Rapiak, Tariq Mbuka, but I think Kostic will be the only one that's back.
Okay, yeah, that's the last thing I was going to ask you was about Rapiak and Mbuka. You think they both end up in the portal?
I haven't heard really anything that suggests that they will stay, that they will be back. And plus, you take a step back, and this is probably just more of my own opinion, not me reporting anything, but Casey Alexander's system, offensively, the way he wants to play, the way he wants his teams to operate, I don't see Doreen Buka fitting in there one bit as a 9 foot tall center, and then Elias Rapiak probably does a little bit of everything on the court, but not as gifted enough offensively to, I guess, fit in Alexander's program. So there's been a little bit of chatter, but I haven't really truly heard anything to say that they're coming back or they should come back, and so I would bank on Kostic being the only one.
What's the latest chatter for K-State football and Colin Klein?
Yeah, spring football's started up, and there's a lot of optimism with Casey Alexander, and I think that that goes hand in hand with Colin Klein. A lot of excitement there, and of course that's a home run hire for Kansas State. And I expected maybe some more skepticism with Alexander, but perhaps the timing with Colin Klein made it all work, and fans are on board with both hires. But I mean, I could sit here all day and just give you the cliches of everybody's happy he's here and K-State legend, but it seems like he is putting together a good coaching staff, a young coaching staff. Something both programs are doing, and we'll see where the rest fall.
Awesome. Ryan Gilbert, GoPowerCat.com, managing editor here on Big 12 Radio. Thanks, Ryan.
Yes, sir. Anytime.
It's Ryan Gilbert from GoPowerCat, GoPowerCat.com. Covers Kansas State. Our full court review, Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps with the Kansas State Wildcats. Anything that's the major takeaway from that conversation with Ryan, and just how different K-State's going to look next year?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, structurally they've made the right choice here. And interestingly enough, it feels like Gene Taylor, coming out of this really poor hire of Jerome Tang has figured out both coach for football and basketball. So, I think the most interesting thing, and we'll obviously have a ton of time to talk about this throughout the offseason, will be what are the expectations, what are reasonable expectations year one, because it feels like the idea of, building something towards the future doesn't exactly play anymore, and the expectations, I'd imagine, for K-State will be to make the tournament next year.
Kansas State hasn't been to the tournament since that 22 Elite Eight run. 4 years later, who would have thought that we'd be talking about a new coach?
23, right?
Was it 23? Yeah. Yes, 23.
Because Kansas won the tournament in 2022.
You're right. Yes, they did. All right, we'll wrap up the program. Coming up next, he's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling, and this is Big 12 Radio.
Looking left, throws.
Jordan Tyson. He found Tyson. Airborne. Got it.
Get downhill fairly quickly.
And big shoes to fill with Cam Scatterbo now in the NFL. Looking for the corner and the catch. Touchdown, ASU. Malik Brown takes his turn. Off play action. Levitt's playing Frogger back there. Oh, he found Tyson. Airborne. Got it. Outrageous.
That's been outstanding time from that college's defense. Levitt throws a laser. It's caught. It's Tyson. It's touchdown.
Responds. Another fourth down forthcoming.
Touchdown! Touchdown! Tyson! Tyson!
Sam Levitt back at the switch. They motion out of the pistol. Play fake. Going vertical. Tyson the target. Contested catch through two. One of the best in college football. Gets the night started in Tempe.
ASU offsides. It worked until it didn't. Now, on a little end around, give into the end zone. Tyson touchdown.
State Wildcats, part of our Modelo full court review, our Modelo Big 12 basketball team recaps. Tomorrow we highlight the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Eric Bailey will join us, the Oklahoma State beat writer for the Tulsa World. Oklahoma State's Anthony Roy is in the portal. They've got a bunch of guys that over the last several hours have entered the portal. Also had Matt Poston's on, Big 12 senior basketball columnist and writer for Heartland College Sports, who did a great job of breaking down all the guys in the portal from the Big 12. And just to kind of put the madness into perspective, so Terrence Brown Jr., the Utah guard, has heard from the following: North Carolina, Oklahoma, USC, Louisville, Memphis, UCLA, Oregon, St. John's, Arkansas, Miami, NC State, Kansas, SMU, LSU, Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, and Missouri.
I don't think you mentioned Kentucky there. He actually, on Instagram, posted a video call of himself with Mark Pope. Why am I forgetting his name?
Yeah, Mark Pope,
Mark
Kentucky
Pope. Thank
coach.
you. For some reason, it didn't sound right in my head. Yeah, so you didn't even mention Kentucky there. He had a video call with Kentucky, which he posted on Instagram.
So Kentucky would be school number 18.
Got it. If you're a 19-point scorer at the Big 12, I think that says something. But again, don't fall for the stinky cheese here.
Did you play on a team that went 2-16?
Like, if there's a blueprint to take away from Dusty Bay in Michigan, and I was arguing against any blueprints, it's don't necessarily look at the numbers. Look at the guy, look at the skill set, how do they fit? That's a huge takeaway for me from this.
Imagine who Rob Wright will hear from, or already has, as he entered the portal about 2 hours ago. PJ Haggerty entered the portal late last night, which I thought he was out of eligibility like 3 seasons ago, but apparently not. PJ Haggerty will be at his 5th school in 5 years next season. So the portal with Badunga and Rob Wright and Haggerty and Brown, but it's not just them. Now, the one school that's done a really nice job of retaining players, at least so far, is TCU. I mean, TCU, Layla Vicious is in the portal, But outside of that, 4 of their 5 starters from last year, at least as of right now, at 9:46 Central Time here on this Wednesday, are returning to TCU.
What about UCF? That was another one I think that
UCF.
That was another one that Matthew Poston's identified as a team that seems to be pretty intact with lots of guys with eligibility left, 9 guys. You know, and it's So you previewed tomorrow. We're talking Oklahoma State, and next year is a huge year for them because 10 years ago you could say, well, yeah, I mean he's building something. In year 3, it'll be when you start to see the benefits of the build. The problem with that is, you could try to build something and then you turn around and the offseason hits and it's like all these guys you're building it with are gone and entering the portal because they're about trying to get theirs, So would it be unfair to say that, hey, a coach needs to win and get to the tournament in year 3? Yeah, to a degree, yeah, it is. But at the same time, it's also not completely unfair. It's completely fair because you've got to hit. And you just don't have time to have time. Fair or unfair, that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, by year 3, he took Oklahoma State to the NIT this past season and the year before. So, like, NIT, the expectation is NCAA tournament.
But the expectation this year was NCAA tournament, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably.
Again, fair or unfair doesn't really matter here. The results are what matter, and we can decide fair, but fair doesn't keep your job. And, Oklahoma State is a very proud basketball program with high expectations.
All right, you asked about UCF. UCF right now only has 1 player in the portal.
Which is?
That player is Chris Johnson, a backup guard.
Got it. Wasn't he a running back?
Yeah, really fast. East Carolina, 4.2 40, shattered records. Really good running back.
I think a lot of these guys love to be chased. They love it. I could guarantee you Terrence Brown loves that 19 teams have called him and offered him something.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knew who Terrence Brown Jr. was outside of Big 12 country, outside of Salt Lake City, until 24 hours ago when all of his Twitter highlights, all of his numbers are out there, and now it's just droves of phone calls.
Do you collect players? Do you get in line with a bunch of other teams and collect players? Or do you build a team with an identity based on the skill set of certain players? Mm-hmm. One wins, one doesn't. We've seen a bunch of teams, Kansas included, take the other approach.
Right. What does Kansas need most?
What I just described. Not to be a collection of players. Not to just collect players. To build a more sustainable system. I think there was a point in time where Bill Self had a system that you could readily identify. That time is gone. And so now it's a constant roster churn, and you're not really sure what their identity is going to be. If I'm Kansas, if I'm Bill Self, I'm looking at my offensive numbers for Ken Palm the last few years, and that's not good enough. I need a better offensive identity. We just saw a team with a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense win a national championship. We know that Kansas and Bill Self could build a championship-level defense. Can you build a championship-level offense? You haven't in a long time.
And on paper, brought in guys that shot the basketball at a really high clip at their previous stops. Remember 2 years ago at Big 12 Media Days, we asked him if this could be his best shooting team ever. Because on paper, they had a bunch of guys that were shooting 40, 45% from 3, and then they got to Kansas and just completely disappeared.
I mean, it's going to be a high freshman team again. They've got a huge freshman class coming in that may or may not include the number 1 player in the nation. Yeah, I mean, I think you need to find guys that fill in around those players and then figure out a way to be a more consistent shooting offense, period. End of story. It's been 4 years now. 4? 3?
3.
3.
This 3-year stretch.
Sounds kind of ridiculous. They won a championship in 2022. Feels like forever ago, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, because this 3-year stretch is the worst 3-year stretch that KU basketball has had.
Under Bill Self. Yeah.
Since the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, Danny and the Miracles was the tail end of that, and they had that historic NCAA tournament run as a 6 seed. But, like, in terms of wins and losses and rank in what was the Big 8 back then, it's the worst 3-year stretch since, like, 86, 87, 88.
Yeah, I mean, I used to end a season as a KU Hoops fan and be very optimistic about the next year, and it feels like after this year, because previously you could go under the auspices of, you know what? Here's a core that just wasn't that good offensively. It's very limited with KJ Adams, DeJuan Harris, and Hunter Dickinson, right? Like you could live on that. I think this year was extremely demoralizing from the standpoint of they weren't there to blame anymore, and it was the same issues. And now you're like redoing it with a similar approach to last year. Okay.
Especially when you've got like developmental guys that could be really good next year. Like Elmarco Jackson and Bryson Tiller and Jamari McDowell showed flashes of being really good glue guys. Like guys that can really help a basketball team. So it's those pieces that blow my mind. Travis Branham of CBS is reporting that the following schools are teams to monitor for Kansas forward Flory Badunga. Louisville, who he's taking a visit to, Texas Tech, Duke, St. John's, and BYU has entered the chat. Flory's chasing that paycheck. All right, one thing I've got during our final whistle, something happened to me yesterday, and I thought WWAD, what would Ari do?
Got it, okay.
So I'm at a stoplight yesterday, and I drive a sports sedan. As you know, people want to see inside. And I'm turning left, and it's like 5 p.m. peak traffic. There's an oncoming vehicle who's also in the turning lane, and I can't see around them. So I have no idea if I'm going to turn into oncoming traffic at 50 miles an hour. So I'm sitting there, and I got the wave of trust from this kind gentleman driving a very large pickup truck, and he politely waved me through. And I blindly turned into my parking lot unscathed. Nobody got hurt. Number one, did I put too much blind trust into this random stranger? Number two, what would Ari do? Because you drive an SUV. Is it a responsibility of yours when you're in that situation to wave through the smaller car?
Okay, help me explain this to me. This person stopped. They were going straight.
No, they're turning as well. We're both turning.
So you're, okay. So he basically was your eyes.
Yes.
Wow.
He was my eyes. I couldn't see around him at all. We're facing each other. We're both turning left at a yellow yield light. It's 5 p.m., like rush hour traffic. There's not a lot of windows. And he saw that nobody was coming, saw that I couldn't see around him, facing him, and he waved me through.
Yeah, that's quite the move. I'm extremely impressed by that. I feel like there are a lot of people that have no awareness. One, care, or two, awareness of like, hey, I'm actually driving a humongous car. That'll happen a lot too when it comes to like U-turn lanes, or like if there's some traffic backing up, people leave way too much space in between that then backs the traffic up even more. And like there's been people I've been behind that clearly have enough space to get into the left turn lane or the turnaround lane that don't, because they don't think they have enough space. It's like, where's your awareness? You clearly have enough space. I'm so aggressive, I will actually go on a curb in order to like make a point. But let me tell you something. That's a great move by that person. I thought what you were telling me was something that drives me absolutely insane.
Okay.
Which is the person like will stop, so they're going straight, and they'll be like, oh, let me be a good Samaritan and stop and then wave the person through. Which, for me, only applicable if traffic is so far backed up to where you can leave a little bit of a gap and allow that person free passage. But if that light is green and people are starting to move and I'm being good Samaritan by stopping, letting somebody come through, that's not a good Samaritan move. That's a bad Samaritan move. And like I've also seen people like stop traffic in that situation, like, oh yeah, go left right in front of me.
Yeah.
Which is hugely dangerous because, you know, if I'm driving straight and I see brake lights for no particular reason, like that's, you know what I mean, that's concerning to me, which I have seen. So I thought at first you were saying this person like stopped as they were going straight to wave you through, which is a huge no-no.
Correct.
It's like there's people that are like, oh, I'm being the safe, nice driver. And it's like you're actually being a moron that's causing way more chaos and issues than somebody who's not, like somebody merging going 30 or 40 miles per hour. That's dangerous. That's not safe. It's extremely dangerous. Get off the highway. If you want to go fast, get off the highway.
The brake pedal is just as dangerous as the accelerator.
Yeah.
But in this particular situation, no, this guy was just being a kind, good Samaritan.
Being aware, I'm in a huge car that maybe this person can't see around, and this poor person's driving a car that I can basically lift with one hand, this tiny little sedan. So
It's a midsize. Have I told you about sport mode?
So, yeah. No, now, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had that before, where somebody like looked for me to see if anybody was coming. Now, should you have blind faith? It's a reasonable question.
It was a risk. It was a risk, but I thought this is my window, and
probably a calculated risk though, because you could always see a little bit.
Like this guy doesn't know me. I don't think he's trying to kill me here in real time. Like, it would be unfortunate for him too. An accident right in front of his vehicle. So yeah, blind. I went all in.
Oh, sometimes though, on those left turn lanes, you do have to kind of make a blind decision there on how aggressive you're going to be.
Dude, it's terrible. It terrifies me.
And I thought you were going to tell me that somebody honked behind you.
No.
Because they felt like you had the window to go. Yeah, right, exactly. And even as aggressive as I am, I would never do that either.
But you have a responsibility now as being in the higher sitting vehicle to wave people through.
Yeah, my car's not that big. I mean, was this guy like an F-350? Is what I'm
probably
picturing?
an F-150.
150 or 350?
No, it was probably a 150.
Okay.
Well, it might have been a 3, actually. It's pretty good. All right, on tomorrow's show, we're going to have Arizona football coach Brent Brennan, so stick around for that. We'll be back tomorrow for a 3 Things Thursday. We'll have all the college basketball transfer portal updates. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling for T-Chains on the audio side. Anthony controlling the buttons on the video side on Big 12 Studios. We're back tomorrow, 8 to 11 Eastern Time. We've been powered by Modelo. Listening to us exclusively on TuneIn, watching on Big 12 Studios. We're out of here.
Peace.